evening, everybody, and welcome. We begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. As opposed to how I usually begin these meetings, tonight's meeting is not being broadcast live by Boston City TV on Comcast Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and Files Channel 1962. Due to some unforeseen technical difficulties, the meeting is currently being taped right now and will be posted to the BPS website within 24 hours, and we believe Boston City TV will be rebroadcasting it shortly, but it is not live, and we apologize for that. So folks who are watching it on tape later, we apologize. It is not live right now. It's unforeseen circumstances with the city cable office, and it will be rebroadcast shortly. And second of all, if anyone wishes to sign up for public comment, please see our school committee staff, Ms. Nina Parvex, out in the main hallway. Sign up for public comment will close at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to begin with several brief announcements. First of all, we're delighted to welcome a special guest with us tonight from Florida. It is not Irma, though Irma impacted a lot of us with Florida roots, but in fact it is the father of our school committee member, Mr. Michael Leconto. His dad, Mr. Walt Leconto, was joined this evening up in Florida with a regular watcher of us in Florida, so we have at least one person in Florida who watches every single one of our meetings. So Mr. Leconto, we're delighted we're with you today, and thank you for sharing your son and your grandchildren with Boston Public Schools as well. So thank you, so we're delighted to hear. Also, would like to announce that for folks that see the agenda that we have posted, after consultation with the superintendent, Vice Chairman Coleman and I have decided to table the vote on the change to the exam school residency verification date until the October 4th meeting. That was done to give the district additional time to provide data supporting the requested change. Folks who were here last week noticed that a number of members asked a number of questions, and the district did work to get us some data, but would like them to clarify a few things. So we have time on this recommendation of the superintendent because if the change takes effect, it wouldn't happen until November, so we can handle this in one of our October meetings. So we've taken that off the posted agenda for this evening. We'll move on now to approval of minutes. If the minutes were approved as presented, hard copies will be made available immediately in the hallway with other handouts. If changes are made, you may access that minutes meeting. Excuse me. You may access the minutes tomorrow on the BPS website. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 6, 2017 school committee meeting as presented. So, thank you, Mr. Leconto. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Uriarte. Any discussion, objection to the motion? Any objection to approving the minutes by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the minutes were approved. We'll move on now to the superintendent's report. I present to our superintendent, Dr. Tommy Chang.
Thank you, Chairman O'Neill. Good evening, school committee. Good evening to those in the audience. Happy to see everyone tonight. We are riding a wave of optimism and enthusiasm to begin the 2016-2017 school year, and it's been exhilarating the last few days as we welcome students back to BPS, and to some of our families welcoming them to BPS for the very first time. And it's always great to see the smiles and excitement of young people on the first day of school. Hopefully all of you have been viewing and sharing our back to school photos on social media. We've been using a hashtag BPS back to school, and over the last week, several BPS and city leaders have joined me on school visits, including Mayor Walsh, Chairman O'Neill, BT President Jessica Tang, Chief of Education Ron Dorsey. We do our traditional handing out of pencils and, of course, the I Love Boston Public Schools stickers to so many students. So we're putting up just a quick little video, and I'm going to talk over the video as the video is playing. No, we're going to actually play the video. Okay, we're going to play the video actually.
telling your teacher they get frustrated. You can't get it, whatever it is, if it's writing or math or whatever it might be. If you're frustrated, don't not tell them. That's what they're there for. They want you to go up and say to them, I'm having a bad time doing something. And they shouldn't talk to them, okay?
Thank you. I want to share some highlights from the first week. I want to start off with a visit to Blackstone, where the CEO and co-founder of Rev Foods, Kristen Richmond, joined Chairman O'Neill, the mayor, and myself as we had lunch on the very first day of school. And we all tried the spaghetti meatballs. It was a dish specifically designed for Boston. And we know our toughest critics, which are our young people, gave those spaghetti meatballs rave reviews. And we even had some students tell us it's the best meal they've ever had in school. So some pictures of that very first day. We also tried a salad as well. But it was just great to be able to see the kind of almost immediate improvement of our school lunches. I remember the first year I was the superintendent, I also joined some school committee members and some senior team members to have lunch at Binka. Actually, that was 2 years ago, and I think we'll continue to do better, and we will continue to do better. So that's one highlight. A second highlight I want to share is that this Monday, I welcome students back to school at the new Mattapan Early Elementary School, which was the former Mattapan School. And it was the first day of pre-K and kindergarten at the school. And a lot of positivity at the school, a lot of smiling faces from parents and students, a lot of tears from parents, actually more tears from parents than students. The principal, Walter Henderson, and his staff did a great job of inviting parents to school on that very first day. We had breakfast with students before the morning bell. And then we went to see the first Haitian Creole dual language classroom in Boston Public Schools. And for me, it almost brought me to tears to be able to see that this program finally is launched. And we have many leaders of the Haitian community there with us that very day, that very first day. We've also completed some facilities upgrades to the building to promote a more safe, welcoming, and sustaining environment, including new furniture for every classroom at that school. We've improved lighting, new ceiling, we've repainted hallways and classrooms, we've repainted the cafeteria, we've brought in new refrigeration, new equipment, and we've reconfigured the main office to promote a more customer service feel. And just exciting, and on top of that, we brought in 6 educators to the school who speak Haitian Creole, along with several other multilingual teachers. And I'm happy to say that there is now a waiting list for students who would like to be enrolled into the program. There are 3 Haitian speakers that are on the waiting list and 13 English-only speakers who are on the waiting list for that program. So I want to thank Principal Henderson and the BPS team that's been helping to publicize the benefits of that program to the community. And it was an amazing first day of kindergarten on Monday. Lastly, I will just say that I want to just give commendations to all the principals, all the teachers, and all the families who have, again, chosen Boston Public Schools. And we welcome back our school communities to school, and we're going to have a wonderful 2017 and 2018 school year. Some data points to share about the beginning of the school year that I want to make sure you are aware of. I want to start with some attendance numbers. Our schools are nearly staffed with principals. I should say all our schools are staffed with our leadership teams, and nearly all our teaching positions are filled, about 99%. We had 32 open positions that were all covered for day one. We always have some unanticipated openings at the beginning of the year, but we were pretty much fully staffed at the beginning of the year. Our attendance rates for the first day of school was 78% attendance. That's in line with previous years. Well, what's very exciting, as of today, the attendance rates have increased to 88%. Actually, as of yesterday, 88%. That compares to 85% from day 4 of last year. So we've shown a 3% increase in attendance rates over the last year. We also had a number of schools in BPS that got to the goal of 95% attendance on day 1. And that included Up Academy Dorchester, Baldwin Early Learning Pilot Academy, the LAK-8, East Boston Early Education Center, Quincy Elementary, Boston Day Evening, Boston Land Academy, and Boston Land School. So a special congratulations to those schools for hitting the 95% mark even from day 1. I know transportation has been in the news quite a bit. I want to take a moment to provide you an update about our transportation system. There's a lot of attention on transportation this year due to the BPS Transportation Challenge, which is our innovative solution to more efficient routing that was created by MIT. I think first of all, I want to stress that BPS is committed to ensuring all our students arrive to school safely and on time every single day. That's our goal, that's our commitment. When it comes to transportation and how we make that happen, how we reach that goal, we have to work in collaboration with our vendor Transdev. They're our third-party transportation service provider. BPS is responsible for the creation of the routes and the customer service aspect. Our third-party vendor Transdev is responsible for operating buses and managing the bus drivers. And we work together in partnership to make sure our kids are getting to school safely and on time. And so I do want to give a special thanks to all the hardworking members of the staff in BPS Transportation Department. This is the toughest time of the year for them, and they are answering a lot of phone calls, managing a lot of issues, and they're basically working around the clock. All this is under the leadership of our CEO, John Hanlon, who is here this evening. It's his birthday, actually. So, John, happy birthday. And I want to share some of the data about transportation just because people I know that are very curious and concerned. On the first day of school, we did experience a decline in performance rates on-time performance. The morning buses were on time 44% of the time on day 1, which was down from 51% from the previous year. Thankfully, our on-time performance in the morning is now 71%, and we still have much more to do. This year, we started doing a deep dive on the performance data, and one of the interesting data points that we've uncovered is the percentage of buses leaving the yard on time has been consistently low. So in the morning on day 1, just under 30% of the buses left the yards on time. And if the buses are not leaving the yard on time, they potentially will not get to school on time. And there's a strong correlation between on time leaving the yard and on time getting to school, which is obviously logical. So we've been working very closely with Transdev to push for that percentage to go up. If they're not leaving the bus yards on time, how are they getting to school on time? It's not the routes, it's them getting out of the buses, getting out of the yards. So I want us to say that as of yesterday, that percentage is now 50%. Another interesting data point that talks about this correlation is that for buses that did leave the bus yard on time, they got to school on time 81% over the last 4 school days. So this data point leads us to believe that low on-time performance rates are not attributed to the new routing system delivered by MIT, but there's more of a correlation with buses leaving the bus yards. I want to highlight that this new routing system, and as we work through these issues, will create $3 to $5 million of reduced costs and will eliminate 50 bus routes. It will reduce our carbon footprint by 20,000 pounds of emissions per day, and will take 1 million miles of trips off city streets a year. And so it is something that I know that we have grappled with over, and I as a leader of BPS have grappled with over the first 2 years, and this year, we're actually making a dent here. And so I want to thank the partnership with MIT, but more importantly than that, just the commitment of the BPS team to make sure we get this right. And one last note, we are not seeing any sort of reduction. I mean, we're not seeing any increases in the length of our trips for our students. That remains at 23 minutes on average district-wide, and 98% of our students have the same bus stops as they had last year. So actually very little movement on where kids are getting on buses as well. So to all our parents, to all our students, thank you for being patient with us. I know many of you are still experiencing difficulties. We're committed to making sure every single young person experiences has a positive experience on our transportation system. Some updates, some other updates I want to provide for folks. It's obviously very heartbreaking to watch images coming out of the Caribbean and Florida as they begin to recover from Hurricane Irma, and the timing obviously only is made worse because of what happened with Hurricane Harvey in Texas. And when Hurricane Harvey struck 2 weeks ago, I issued a call for action to our school leaders, and I talked about that last week. I'm happy to report now that we have over 70 schools that are now paired up with schools in Houston, and there is a little video I actually want to share. This is a video that's compiled. It's different clips from different videos that our schools have sent to Houston schools.
John W. McCormick Middle School here in Boston. We want to say that we stand with you. We want to extend our arms around everyone, all the students and families and schools in Houston.
We have the staff from the Linden Catering School in Boston, Massachusetts, and to you, our colleagues in Houston, we're sending you our Boston Strong attitude. You will get through this most difficult time because educators never give up.
My name is Audrey. I'm a senior at EMK, and your families are in my prayers.
My name is Ida. I'm a senior at EMK.
I am Jerome. I'm a junior, and I'm sending my love and support all the way from Boston to you, H-Town.
WPP, stay strong. Houston strong.
So thank you to the school, or to BPS schools, and to Houston. You have our thoughts, and you have our commitment to helping support you as you go through your recovery. And obviously, many of our BPS families are also affected, and staff are affected by what is happening in Florida because of Irma. We have over 4,300 students who were born in Caribbean countries and territories like the U.S. Virgin Islands, Cuba, Turks and Caicos, Haiti, Puerto Rico, and DR. We have another 570 students who actually were born in Florida. And so that is why on Sunday we sent out a letter to all our students and staff providing them resources to talk to students about coping with the effects of a natural disaster, as well as links to many charitable organizations that are currently seeking donations for hurricane relief efforts. Again, I just want to send my regards to the communities in Florida and to the many large county districts, school districts that are there. I've been in contact with a few superintendents there, and they are slowly coming out of it, and the schools will be the school reopenings will be kind of staggered over the next month. So, a couple more updates for you. I want to give you an update on Dorchester Academy. I know that some of you have had some questions about Dorchester Academy. As we informed the school committee in August, BPS and ABCD mutually agreed to conclude our partnership related to Dorchester Academy. The school had been designated level 4 by the state in 2014, and ABCD took on an active role during the 2015-2016 school year with the leadership and programming at the school. And since then, Dorchester Academy has been a turnaround school, which previously was a traditional high school, but basically ran an alternative education program. And unfortunately, the statutory expectations for turnaround schools, specifically a requirement for reporting data from testing cohorts of ample size, are not compatible with the format of a small alternative program. So with all that in mind, BPS and ABCD have mutually decided to return the school to full BPS operations and for it to be part of its BPS alternative school program. And we want to thank ABCD for their, obviously, their commitment, their service, and helping to implement an innovative school model that serves our most marginalized students. And we are happy to be continuing to work with our students. I'm happy to say we have a positive start to the school year at Dorchester Academy. Teachers are teaching, students are learning. Our teams from the Re-Engagement Center and the Alternative Education Department, supported by our high school office, have been working hard to engage each student individually. Individual meetings with each returning students have happened, and we've completely reviewed their programs and created a plan for each individual student. And some of those plans did have a recommendation to maybe move to another program that will better get them ready to graduate as quickly as possible. We have worked with several students again to propose these reassignments, and because we believe and in concert with the families, and we believe they'll meet their educational needs. As anticipated, this is lowering the enrollment of the school, which is why we offer teachers who have been there last year the opportunity to transfer to other schools in BPS. Several did make those transitions. At the same time, many teachers remain committed to that program because they have relationships with students in that school, and they're committed to the mission of the school. And so the school has opened successfully this year, and we will continue the academic and support work for these young people at Dorchester Academy. So that's really good news stories. I want to make sure I share that with you. As the fall semester moves on, I will provide the school committee with additional updates about the school. Okay? And in conclusion, I just want to again thank students, I want to thank families, I want to thank parents, I want to thank staff at BPS for a strong beginning of school year. I look forward to an amazing year of learning. That concludes my remarks for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Oliver-Davila.
I just wanted to get a little clarity on the buses leaving out of the lot. I don't know what that means, that they're not leaving on time, and what is the holdup and what is the strategy? And I wonder if also you have any statistics on the charter school buses too, because I know we had parents testify, and I've also had parents come and talk to me, so I'd be curious to see how that is going as well.
I'm going to ask John Hanlon to come up to answer some of the questions. I will start off by saying that we have heard from charter school parents and charter school leaders at the beginning of the year that a good number of issues that we've had to address in partnership with TransDev, and John can get into some more detail. So I want to acknowledge that there have been issues, and we've been working very closely with charter leaders. We've actually created a Tiger team that meets every single day with charter leaders to help address some of the issues. In regards to on-time buses leaving their yard on time, that is an issue that we're still currently investigating because we are not completely sure why that continues to be an issue. But I'm going to let John elaborate a little bit more.
So as far as the yard departures are concerned, and Dr. Chang is right, we're continuing to explore that. We should be concluding a pretty full analysis of that over the next couple of days. It's a host of different issues that go into that. Clearly, we're very unhappy with a 50% on-time yard departure rate in the morning. It goes up quite a bit within 15 minutes of the time that they're supposed to depart the yard to something in the high 80s, if I remember correctly, but still that's unacceptable. It's, as I said, a number of different issues that are factored into that. So in some cases, the number of routes that have to be bid on a daily basis is longer than or larger than what would be ideal, and then that standby bidding process then takes longer than it should, which then means that some of those buses are getting out later than they should. In some cases, there are just simple systems issues that we're trying to work through with Transdev right now to tighten up some of the operations there to make sure that we can support as much as we can through our vendor to manage the system better. And I will say that Transdev has been a willing partner in that so far, but we do need to improve some of those systems. In some cases, the inspections of the buses that the drivers need to do are taking longer than they should. As I said, it's really a host of different issues that we're really trying to dig deep into right now to really figure out what the primary factors are of this, because quite frankly, it caught us by surprise that it was as low as it was, because certainly a 31% on-time departure rate from buses in the first day is just absolutely inexcusable. In addition, to answer a couple of the other questions, we don't slice our on-time percentage data by charter schools, private special education facilities, BPS schools, so on and so forth, because quite frankly, we look at all the schools that we serve the same. So the on-time percentage rates that Dr. Chang mentioned before are across the board, and not just our BPS schools, but all schools that we're serving. We could look at that. I don't know, just to be fair, I don't know what purpose that would serve, because we're trying to make sure that we're trying to serve all schools the same, but we could look at that and report back to the school committee on that if we'd like. There were, as testimony alluded to last week, there were some issues with the charter sector that came up simply because many of our drivers were not coming back to work until last Thursday with the start of the school year for Boston Public Schools, and that should not have been the case. They should have been coming back when the routes were ready to go for those schools that were starting prior to September 7th. There was also a systems issue between BPS and Transdev earlier on that led to a problem of overlapping routes over the last week of August, which led to some coverage concerns. Fortunately, there were a small number of route problems during those days. It's just that those route problems were, as I understand it, pretty serious. We're not dealing with those problems anymore now that the school year has started. Our driver force is fully in effect. There are some other start of school year challenges that we're working through right now that we deal with every year, and I'm happy to say that we're making improvements every single day, school by school, bus by bus, family by family, and I can't say enough for how hard the team is working on that.
Thank you. The reason I ask about charter schools is they do start earlier, so I would assume that you have data. And I ask that because it would give us a sense also, since not all the buses were on the road, we can have a better idea too of what happened, since many of them started before even Labor Day, which traffic is out of control at this point, as we know. And I won't jump to any conclusions, as I learned at the last school committee, I jumped to conclusions, so I'm gonna wait for the investigation, and I'd love to hear more about what is happening, and then also what is the strategy, and what is our recourse, because these are people that are working for the district, and, I have the luxury of driving my daughter to school. I'm very lucky that I can do that, but that's not every family. And, the notion of having, kids standing at bus stops waiting, I want to make sure that we obviously fix that. And I have another question that's not related to this, so I just want to stop in case people have questions they want to ask him, and then you can.
Oh, sure, that's a good idea, right. Dr. Uriarte, do you have a question for Mr. Hanlon?
Well, I was going to push back a little bit on the segregation of the data. I think that the question of transparency on this issue is really important, I think. And usually, when you tend to, present things in the aggregate, everybody wants to see that unpacked. And this is a good one to unpack, I think. And we could think of others by neighborhood, et cetera, because there is, the perception that not everybody is treated the same. So, I mean, I'm not accusing them, what I'm saying is the best way to figure out whether that is the case or not is to do analysis.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is that one of the capabilities that we have now more than we've ever had before is the ability to do more real-time analysis on issues like this due to some increased capacity in that area. So this is something we'll be able to turn around in the next day. It's easy enough to do.
So then it would be easy to just disaggregate so that we could get a better picture of who's being affected by delays and so.
Yes, and as we all know clearly within each sector, there are certain schools that are more negatively impacted or more positively impacted than others. It really varies, not across sectors, but within sectors.
And Mr. Hamlin, in line with that, and as Dr. Uriarty said about unpacking a little bit, we have three yards, bus yards. Four. Is there a difference in the leaving the yard on-time data between the four?
There is. It's not a significant difference, but we do see some bus yards are a little bit more challenging getting their buses out on time than others. You might see one that has a 45% rate, and another one that has a 60% rate, and we're trying to work very closely with Transdev to again sort of tighten the operations within those yards, and also look at what our routes say to make sure that we're not providing our routes with too much what they call deadhead time, which then gives drivers the sort of the ability to leave the yard on late and still catch up. That shouldn't be happening either, right? They should be leaving the yard when they're supposed to be leaving the yard. So we are trying to work very closely with this, and we are disaggregating this data across bus yards, across different geographies to figure out what's really happening there.
I'm stumped though why a week into the school year, we're at about a 50% buses leaving the yard on time. I can see the first day, getting used to a new route, that type of thing. How is this still happening a week into it? You know, if my boss says be at work at a certain time, you're at work at a certain time. So if you're told you're driving a bus and it's to pull out of the yard at 6:30, 6:35, whatever, how is that not happening? I'm really confused by this.
I wish I could give you a better answer to that. Quite frankly, it is frustrating. We're trying to look into it very, very deeply because we know it's causing a big impact right now.
Do we need more BPS resources there working with Transdev? Is it meeting with the union? Does the bus drivers union understand this is an issue?
As far as I know, the bus drivers union does understand this is an issue. It's come up in the past. We are deploying some of our own BPS resources to bus yards each and every morning. The Deputy Chief of Operations, Charles Granson, was at the Freeport bus yard this morning before 6 a.m. Our customer service manager, Delaware Stanislaus, has been at the Reedville or Freeport yards in several mornings so far this year. So we are trying to put more of our eyes on the ground, so to speak, at those bus yards to assist with managing the operations there where we need to. And again, I wish I could give you a better answer to this. We're really trying to tackle it head on right now. And unfortunately, the improvement has been slower than what we would like.
Should Transdev have more resources there at the yards?
Potentially, and we're having conversations with Transdev on those operations now. I'm meeting actually with their regional general manager tomorrow to discuss this and other matters.
What would you consider to be an acceptable on-time rate leaving the yard?
100%.
100%. Did we reach that last year?
No.
Okay. What was our average last year?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't remember the data, but it was below 100%.
Okay. Do we have to have drivers come in earlier? Is that something that has to be negotiated with the union, or do we need to change procedures, or is it getting people to follow the procedures? Is it they're not following the procedures properly, or are the procedures not correct?
It's, as I said, and I apologize for not being able to give very complete answers because I don't want to be unsatisfactory in how I respond, but I think it would be unfair to generalize and to sort of speculate right now on exactly what the primary causes are, when I do believe it's a host of different causes that are leading this to happen. Sure, there probably are some drivers who aren't following procedures. There probably are some drivers who are absolutely following procedures, but other things are tripping up the process and they're leaving the yard later than what we would like. And again, it's unacceptable and something that we are trying to take seriously. Quite frankly, it's a very complicated system that we're trying to analyze right now, and it's not as easy as just looking at it for one day's worth of observations and coming up with conclusions.
Well, I do know how hard you and your team are working on this, and I do recognize today is only the 5th day of school. So that's why we had originally intended to have it, if we were gonna have a September 20th meeting, we were gonna have an update on, open school statistics. We recognized it was too soon to do for this meeting, with this literally being only the 5th day of school. So at our October 4th meeting, we will have an extensive presentation on, opening school that includes attendance, teachers, everything. And at that time, I would anticipate transportation would be a big part of the presentation. So, and I assume will be substantially higher at that point. If it's more resources that we need, either from BPS or to push Transdev, please let us know how we can help.
Will do. Thank you.
Dean Robinson, you have a question?
Thank you for the updates, and I am on the receiving end of it, so I know how hard you all are working. So Chairman, I'm also wondering, we're talking about a week out, but because last week they started with older students and this week adding kindergartners, has that maybe created more of some of the challenges with the routes, because now there are more children and more routes? I wanted to make sure we're cognizant of, just all the complexities. So do you think that could also be why there's still a lot of moving parts here, because we've added kindergartners this week?
Yes, and that happens every year, so it's not to say that we weren't expecting that,
Right.
because we do see that every year, that from day 1 to day 2, there's a jump in on-time percentage, and then from day 2 to day 3, when kindergarten starts, it drops back a little bit, because we
Right.
have so many 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that are now boarding buses, and quite frankly, we need to be extremely attentive to little children as they're getting on buses, some of them the first time ever in their lives. That does slow things down. We have a lot of parents, as I was one day, taking pictures of the kid with their bus and the bus
Listen,
driver meeting everybody.
I'm
so-
telling you, I saw it all week long, and so the challenges of 3, 4, 5-year-olds crying, parents trying to get them where they need to go, the bus driver still trying to smile while they're waiting for that child to get on the bus. So I echo everyone's, questions, and I'm confident that you'll be able to report back the details and the data, but I just wanted to highlight how challenging the week has been for the students, the first-time students, and I'd like, if possible, if you could just relay a message from the committee to your team, our appreciation of their hard work. I know their phones have been ringing off the hook, but I also want to highlight the teachers who had to help navigate the buses, and most importantly, the office secretaries. If you can relay a message to the office secretaries who every day have had to help the routes, have had to change the labels on the kids' backpacks so that it could reflect the route that would work. The office secretaries at the schools.
Real leadership in the schools.
I've been on the receiving end and I've watched it happen, and they're still doing it with a smile on their face. So I know we have to pay attention to Transdev and, the drivers and all of those aspects, but there are also car drivers now that are increasing because parents are taking their children to school, so the routes are looking a little different. So if you could just relay the message to your team, this is a bear to manage, and you all have been doing your due diligence and getting kids safely to school, and still trying to do it with somewhat of a smile on your face and going to sleep at night. If you are getting any sleep, I'm not sure, but thank you for what you've done, and thank you to the teachers and the school leaders and the office secretaries.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hanlon? Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Very
Hanlon.
quickly,
Yeah.
John, I want to thank you for your leadership, especially just putting these new data systems in place so we can actually track this data, because we weren't able to do all this before. And so now we can actually have data that will help guide our support of and addressing of this issue. Thank you.
And if I may, if it's okay to say, I appreciate Dean Robinson that you're appreciating the team. That really goes a long way, because they really are working extremely, extremely hard every morning, starting at 5 a.m. and not going home until 8 p.m. The team's really working hard on this, and we are hearing some feedback on some issues that we have to address, as happens at the beginning of the school year every year. And I'm proud to say that taking a bus-by-bus, family-by-family, school-by-school approach is working, and we're getting there, and we will continue to get there. I just want people to know that we're hearing the concerns that they're bringing to us, and we're working very hard to fix them each and every day. And I'm also glad you mentioned the school secretaries, because they really are the unsung heroes in this whole operation, so it's great to hear about that.
My editorial comment to Dean Robinson was not disrespect to our school leaders. there was respect for the hard work of the school secretaries.
Right.
So, and thank you for you and your entire team, and happy birthday. We'll move on now. I believe, Ms. Oliver, you had another question for the superintendent on his report.
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question. I just wanted to say that I was really saddened to hear about Dorchester Academy. I think Dorchester Academy had its on-track students transferred to other schools and was left with overage and undercredited young people. And we know that that takes a lot more work, and that we can't see, things and changes happen in a year, and really looking at alternative schools differently, and not using standardized metrics in a traditional way. I know they did a lot of work around creating portfolios. 100% of their 2016 seniors graduated in our college, 86% going towards graduation in 2017. So I just want to say I was just saddened to hear that. I know the work of ABCD through University High School. Alternative school is just something that I have worked on for many, many years. And so it just makes me sad. It makes me sad for the students and the school community. So I would just say that I know we don't have extra resources, but whatever extra resources we have to really make sure that those students feel good about the changes that are happening, their families feel good, because it is a lot of changes all coming at the same time. And again, I don't know if this is also, as you stated in your presentation, things that are requirements, but I just think looking at alternative education, it just has to be looked at very differently than the rest of our traditional schooling when we look at overage and undercredited youth. Thank you.
Ms. Oliver, you and I have shared a passion for alternative education in BPS for many years, and I've worked on it, and I share your concern, and would deeply appreciate that the district update us in the coming months on where we stand on alternative education, and see if we can work in, as you pointed out, and as the superintendent pointed out, are there ways we can get the state to recognize that alternative education program is slightly different, but it's an important arsenal for us to have. It's arrows in the quiver, as I always say, that we have to have. So, Superintendent, if we could look to add a full report on alternative education, of where it stands and where it's going in the future in light of the learnings from Dorchester Academy, that would be very helpful. Of course. Thank you. If there's no other comments, yes, Dr. Uriarte.
I too want to talk about the Dorchester High School, and I was also saddened to see, because we had partnered for many years with ABCD, having been in a competency-based system at UMass, and so I knew about it. I was very surprised now when you said that the issue was testing, because there are alternatives to MCAS allowed by the state. So I'm concerned about how that happened. Why was it that MCAS testing would be the litmus test for Dorchester Academy and ABCD, when in fact, portfolios are part of what the state accepts as a method of evaluation for students.
Yeah. So either Donna or maybe Leah can back up my remarks. Obviously, this happened before my time here, but when the school did go into level 4, was designated level 4. It was designated as level 4 as a traditional school, and as part of the negotiations to bring ABCD as a partner, the conditions in which a school leaves out of level 4, based on the state, are all kind of very traditional metrics. And this is something that we're going to have to explore with the state, because the school will never come out of level 4 if we continue to use these traditional metrics.
That's I think that's the point.
So we are that's to be negotiated with the state over time. And Donna, anything you want to add to that? Anything else? Okay, so.
But why not not push the state on something like, Dorchester Academy?
I think we are in negotiation with the state about this. Yeah. Absolutely.
But they're wrong already.
ABCD?
Yeah.
Though, but that was a joint decision, that we felt that it would be best bring the school into just the BPS fold and for us to work with the state on it, so. And if there's other opportunities in the future, I mean, both organizations are open to continuing partners. They work with us in other contexts as well. Just in the context of Dorchester Academy, they no longer are going to be operating the school.
But I think ABCD is a strong partner with the district, University High, Ostagai High, et cetera. We've had a long relationship with them. The superintendent said it was a mutual decision with them on this particular school. But there is no disrespect towards ABCD at all.
But I'm wondering if, I don't know, I'm not trying to read into it, but I'm wondering if the disappointment is that because we've had a strong partner, what are we providing as strong resources for Dorchester Academy while we are also in process of pushing back on the state regarding alternative education? If we're losing a partnership, what are we gaining that's going to continue to provide strong partnership and resources for a school like this?
I would like to respectfully suggest that we're about to have a discussion now about our at-risk lower level threes, and as opposed to what are our resources to one school, that's a perfectly appropriate question, but it's also appropriate to say when we have the presentation on our at-risk schools, what are our resources that we're giving to our level fours and our at-risk level threes? So in the interest of moving this forward with permission of fellow members, I would like to just kind of pick up the course of that conversation during our agenda item on our at-risk level performance schools. Is that okay, Dr. Uriarte? You still vote?
Yeah, I'm, sure it's okay, but I'm saying, I think we need to think through, what is, I think we're totally correct. What is happening now? Why is it better than what was there with ABCD, when ABCD has such a tremendous experience in dealing with this? So, it's gonna take a big, low, very high bar to convince many of us that, about why is this better than what was there before. So,
Okay.
that's just a concern. The ABCD is not a non-entity in the city. People know ABCD.
Very well, and they've been a strong partner for years. So I think the superintendent has heard the concerns raised. Let's move forward, and then we will be talking about our at-risk schools. Let's make sure to have that conversation. Dr. Muncy, I think, would probably join you on that, of course, the conversation as well, and address the concerns raised, and if need be, we'll allow the superintendent some time to come back to us in more detail on that as well. Okay. So I think that addresses any other questions or comments regarding the superintendent's report. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to receive the superintendent's report as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. It sounds like a second from Dean Robinson. Any discussion or objection to the motion? Any objection to receiving the superintendent's report by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the motion carries. We'll move on now to general public comment. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for a later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll remind you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then 30 seconds. Those who require interpretation services will be allotted additional 2 minutes. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name and affiliation before you begin. TV cameras will only record speakers who face the committee. We have 7 speakers this evening, beginning with Rosemary Connors. She'll be followed by Judith Flynn and Julia Stoll.
Hi, good evening, members of the school committee and members in attendance. I am expecting another nurse or two to come. They are caught in traffic, so I did reserve a block of time for school nurses to speak. Is that on the agenda?
No. People sign up by 6:30 when they get here. If not, they're free to sign up for public comment later on in the evening.
Okay, great, thank you. So my name is Rosemary Coners, and I'm a school nurse, And Dr. Chang, it was wonderful having you at the Ellison Parks Early Education School where I work. I was disappointed I didn't see you in our school on the video, but I'm sure you'll come and visit us some other time. So I live in Dorchester. My 2 grown children have attended BPS schools, with the youngest one graduating in 2006 from Boston Latin School. I've been employed by BPS as a school nurse for the last 20 years. I am speaking to you tonight as a school nurse and a concerned citizen of Boston. BPS lists the #1 essential competency for instructional equity as create and maintain a safe, healthy, and sustaining learning environment, and notes healthy learning environments are essential because poor health makes it challenging for students to focus on learning and leads to missed school days. Health inequities in nutrition, physical activity, vision, teen pregnancy, behavioral and mental health, and asthma interfere with learning and disproportionately impact low-income youth of color. In 2010, Dr. Charles Foss coined the term educationally relevant health disparities in his work, Healthier Students Are Better Learners. As we know, poverty adds to the burden of health disparities. Roxbury, Mattapan, and parts of Dorchester have the highest rates of child poverty in the Commonwealth. That's a very interesting word, Commonwealth. Concurrently, 40 to 50% of adult residents in these areas of our city do not have a high school diploma. BPS data shows that approximately 1/4 of BPS students has at least one special health care need, and the numbers are steadily increasing. Our students have the burden of chronic diseases such as asthma, diabetes, and sickle cell disease. Additionally, the number of students dependent on medical technology and in need of skilled nursing interventions in order to access the curriculum are increasing.
30 seconds.
I'm sorry?
30 seconds.
Okay. So in conclusion, I'd like to say, how can we be good citizens and be negligent in providing the most basic level of health care to our most vulnerable children? We know what children need to grow and learn. We must give our children the resources they need. It is our civic duty to close the opportunity and the achievement gap and eliminate educationally relevant health disparities. A full-time school nurse must become part of the foundation budget that is allocated for every school. And in closing, I'd like to say Boston is very proud of its history as being the oldest public school system, the oldest public schools, 1647. That's a wonderful year. But what I'm saying is that 375 years later, can't we do better for all of our children? A school nurse in every school, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carnes.
Our next speaker is Judith Flynn. She'll be followed by Julia Stoller and Deontay McLeodaden. Is Ms. Flynn with us? Okay, our next speaker is Julia Stoller,
And then followed by, I'm sorry.
followed by Deontay McLeodaden.
Hi, my name is Julia Stoller, and I taught at Dorchester Academy last year, and currently I teach at Boston Day and Evening Academy. First, I've talked to some colleagues, and I can second what the superintendent said about this school year starting off to a good start. However, this current Dorchester Academy is only serving about 30 of its former students, and so I'm here along with one of my former DA students to discuss how the district's communication about unenrolling students from Dorchester Academy created chaos in their lives, caused them to blame themselves, and did not give them adequate time or resources to find a new school. This experience was traumatic for many students, especially given that Dorchester Academy is an alternative school serving at-risk students, many of whom face serious obstacles to graduating and have already had to transfer schools multiple times. I want to take a few minutes to describe the aspects of the unenrollment process that made it so hard on my students. First, the district didn't tell students that they were no longer enrolled at DA until mid-August. Therefore, many were forced to begin the process of finding a new school literally days before classes started. For students who looked to school as a source of stability and an opportunity for success, this was a shock to the system. I called each of my students to check in about the news, and one of them cried over the phone, explaining that she had mentally prepared to finish her classes at DA this year, and the thought of transferring again was too much to bear. Second, the letter the district sent home made many students, the district that sent home was deceptive. It didn't once mention that Dorchester Academy was getting restructured, and instead pointed to students' attendance and academics as the reason for their unenrollment, causing many students to feel blamed. The letter also made it seem that re-enrolling in a new school was optional, and as such, a number of students thought they could stay at DA and did not contact the re-engagement office. A few showed up to DA on September 7th, and upon learning that day that they were no longer enrolled at school, became so outraged and escalated that they had to be escorted out of the building. Third, the communication was minimal and put the burden on the students to navigate finding a new school with little guidance. The only contact students received in the district was a letter in the mail, and a number of my students overlooked it or never received it. Additionally, the letter put the onus on the student to contact the re-engagement office and apply to a new school. I know from at least one of my students that contacting the re-engagement office was difficult. She called multiple times and left voicemails, forcing her to wait and become more anxious as the days passed before September 7th. I want to reiterate that because Dorchester Academy is an alternative school serving at-risk students, this was an extremely traumatic experience. Dorchester Academy was supposed to be the opportunity these students never got to graduate, and instead the district betrayed many of them by unenrolling them at the absolute last minute and then leaving the students to fend for themselves. I'm about to pass the microphone to one of my former students. Currently he, like a number of his peers, is not enrolled in a new school. It is 5 days into the school year.
Ms. Scala? Ms. Scala, did I pronounce it correctly? Ms. Scala, yes. Is that printed remarks?
Yes.
Would you mind giving a copy of that if you have it to Ms. Sullivan, please? Do you also have any examples of the letters that you referenced?
Yeah, I have one of my students. I asked one of my students to read the letter that she received in the mail to me over the phone, and it's what I said. It doesn't say once that Dorchester Academy is getting restructured. It just says, we reviewed your academics and you need to enroll in a new school. Please contact the re-engagement office.
Thank you, Ms. Scala. We'll make a copy of that if you need it back, but I'd like to make sure all members get a copy of that. Thank you.
Could we get a copy of that?
That's why I was asking for it, so that we could all get a copy of it, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, we're gonna ask the district for copies of all communications that went to students. I figured that would be better than asking an individual student for a copy of it.
Hi, my name is Deontay McLeod Leonard, and I am a former student at Dorchester.
So could you just speak a little closer to the microphone and just a little louder, because we want to hear you. Thank you.
My name is Deontay, and I'm a former student at Dorchester Academy, and I was one of those students who did not get the letter in the mail, and I had gotten the information from a teacher, or a former teacher, in mid-August, like Ms. Stalla said, and as I was trying to call the school to find out if I was enrolled in the school, the teacher was trying to call the issue if I was enrolled in the school, and nobody was answering during the summertime in August. And actually one of my friends got up on the first day of school because he was happy that he was going to be finally a senior. So he got up on the first day of school, got in the shower, got dressed, got ready, and then he called the school before he left his house, and then that's when they told him that he was not enrolled in the school. And he was angry because they didn't give him previous information on how to enroll in other schools, or they didn't tell him at all that he was not enrolled in Dorchester Academy. And so did one of my other friends, Russell. He didn't get a letter either. So we had to call him as his good friends. We called him, And we told him, like, you know, some of us didn't make it to the school, how about you call? And he called, and then they told him that he wasn't in the school either, but he was a senior. And the information that I got was, if you're a senior or a junior, you'll be attending the school. And I'm a senior, Danny's a senior, and Rustin's a senior, and we all got, like, removed from the school. And we didn't get any information on how to re-enroll back into the BPS school, which was very frustrating because they all came to me because my father had taken matters into his hands, and I had to take matters into my own hands because I had contacted Boston Day and Evening Academy, and I have been trying to call the school, and my father has been trying to call the school, and they haven't been answering the phone. Until yesterday, I finally called, like, I don't know what he works for the school, but I called somebody that works within the school, and he said, you know, we're not enrolling students until January, and I'm not gonna not go to school until January because I want to graduate this year since I'm a senior. So I said, I'm from Dorchester Academy. As soon as I said that, the secretary took my number and she said, we'll call you back. And it has been 2 days and I didn't get a call back. And so I'm going to go up to the school myself in person and find out what's going on. And
So, Deontay, I'm going to interrupt you, and I call you Deontay because you didn't say your last name. I didn't catch it.
Claude.
Okay, well, thank you, sir, and thank you for coming and speak to us today. I'm going to ask Dr. Noriega Murphy, who is the overall head of our high schools, to stand up first of all, and to meet with you directly now, one-on-one, and let's get this solved for you this evening, if at all possible. Okay. And I look forward to Ms. Noriega Murphy giving details back to the superintendent that he can share with the fellow members of this committee, both about yourself and some of your fellow former classmates as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming and sharing your story with us this evening, and she's waiting to talk to you right in the back of the room.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's nothing more frustrating to us as students who want to continue their education, and you're trying to do that, so thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Okay? Ms. Noriega Murphy, you'll meet with them. Thank you. This next, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vicky Fan, and we have a Cantonese interpreter ready to assist her. She'll be followed by John Mudd and Tiffany Payne.
Is Ms. Fan here with her interpreter? Yes? Oh, okay. What, not quite ready yet? Okay, why don't we go with Mr. Mudd next, and then we'll go with Ms. Fan. Oh, she's here? Okay.
Dear Mr. Chairman and Dr. Chang, my name is Vicky. I'm coming here to share some of my comments about inclusion. I think the district should provide more inclusion opportunities to students with disabilities. In substantially separate classrooms, students lack of opportunities to learn from children, especially language. It's very important to speak more and listen more with children without disabilities. Disability students usually study at one or two classrooms for more than 80% of their time and about 10 students. They do not have enough social participation. They are all disability students. They have no chance to learn positive behaviors from students without disabilities every day. And also because teachers were good to them and without behavioral support, they think disabilities behavior are right for them to do. So they copy all different kinds of disabilities behavior each other. When they grow up and go out to the world, how they can face the world, how they can do well in the world, they will have the behaviors. They will bring all different kinds of disability behavior, they copy to the wall. General education students cannot understand them, and they cannot understand general education students. So full inclusion is absolutely the best and the right for all students to develop positive academic behavior and social participation. My son liked everything a lot at Henderson. After I told him he needed to do everything good at school, and then he could stay. He did very well in each transaction and in the large class before he left Henderson. The last 5 days, when I told him that he could not continue to study at Henderson, he cried. This is the only full inclusion class he had studied. He did not want to leave and cried. He himself requested to school director that he wanted to stay in Henderson. My son had been through full inclusion program and Modern and Boston, general education and Boston, substantially separate classroom at Quincy and Boston. I fully and clearly can see full inclusion is the best and the only way for students with disabilities, like my son, develop a positive academic behavior and social participation. My son likes to study at Henderson a lot. Henderson has one general education teacher and one special education teacher at each class, 20 students with which 15 regular students and 5 students with disabilities. Co-teaching is the best model for inclusion to meet all students' needs. I disagree. Teacher with dual license would be good model for inclusion, even though with all the profession development and parallel support, there are many students need to meet. The teacher will feel overwhelmed. If the teacher wants to do it right to provide students with real inclusion, it should do it in the best way. Instead of cutting corners, substantially separate classrooms should not be continued. It should be closed. Psychologists at Children's Hospital Boston said substantially separate classroom is not for my son. I strongly believe that full inclusion is good for the children, good for the people, good for the country, and good for my son. Full inclusion means that all students, regardless of handicapping condition or severity, will be in a regular classroom program full-time. All service must be taken to the trial in that setting. Disability students need to learn from students without disability and study a larger class. Students without disability also need to understand students with disabilities. Inclusive education happens when children with and without disability participate and learn together in the same class. Such shows that when a child with disability attends class alongside peers who do not have disability, good things happen. When children are educated together, positive academic and social outcomes occur for all the children involved. All children belong. All children learn in different ways. It is every child's right to be included. Families' version of the typical life for their children can come true. Children develop a positive understanding of themselves and others. Friendships develop. Children learn important academic skills. All children learn by being together. Segregation doesn't work. When children are separated based on race, ability, or any other characteristics, separated education is not an equal education. Research shows that typical children and children with disability learn as much or more in inclusive classes. So full inclusion is the best and the right program for my son and all students, not just in Boston, Massachusetts, also in all America. General education classes and substantially separate classrooms should go together to become full inclusion classes like Henderson, Mary Lyon inclusion school.
Excuse me, I'm afraid you're past your time, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could get a copy of your written remarks, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for both of you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Mudd, and he'll be followed by Tiffany Payne.
Good evening, John Mudd. I must say it's hard to follow the testimony of the teachers and students at Dorchester Academy with the kind of broad policy issues that I tend to dwell on, and it makes me, and I'm sure you, all realize that implementation with integrity at the classroom level for each student is what really counts and what we're all about. And I'm sure you will follow through on that issue better than I can. At the last session last week, I mentioned, that I thought that the opportunity and achievement gap issues needed to be embedded in all actions and discussions of the school committee and the district. And I suggested then that one opportunity would be in the development of the future program budgets that we will receive for this year and for next year. Many of you know I've been talking for years about the importance of the program budgets, and I think that this has been a crucial and extremely important beginning. And I don't want my testimony to be taken to be a criticism of this effort, because I think it lays the groundwork for very important work in the future. But I have to say, and that as I read the document, and I think each of you got a copy in July as I did, opportunity and achievement gap issues and plans were not given sufficient attention in this document. Now, I don't want to be unfair, because this is fiscal year 17, which is last year, but this is what we have as a model for the future. And when I read that OAG, Opportunity and Achievement Gap, were not listed among the school committee's priorities, was not specified as a focus for the mayor's transition team, and was not mentioned in the description of BPS's key strategies and major initiatives, I think that's of concern. And that's just overall. In terms of the program descriptions of each department, I also don't think that those issues receive sufficient attention. Not only should they receive attention here, but they should be dovetailed with the narratives and the SMART goals that have been developed with the OAG implementation plan. So I would hope that you would ask the superintendent and his staff that for the future, for the FY18 program budget that will come to you for this year, and for the future budget proposals that will come to be made public and discussed this spring, that you would ask that the opportunity and achievement gaps be embedded deeply in each aspect of the work. And I want to stress, it's not just, it should be in every department, but critical issues like professional development cross departmental lines. And that, for professional development, frankly, I am very critical of myself for having watched or not seen that we fragmented and reduced the funding for professional development. It is here professional learning, Office of English Language Learners, special education, the schools division, and schools. And I think that you need to have sections in the program budget that look at these cross-cutting issues like professional development and, for example, staff diversity and hiring. Thank you for indulging me again.
Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tiffany Payne.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tiffany Payne. I am a parent to 3. I just actually moved to Boston this year, June, so we come from Haverhill, Massachusetts. The minute that I had signed my kids up to Boston Public School, it was a nightmare. I felt like I was mistreated in the Welcome Center, to misplacement of paperwork all over the place, to you guys updating systems, and all my children's paperwork basically just thrown all around and not updated at all, and I was very displeased with that. Not only that, but the schools that they were chosen to go to was not the adequate schools that they were supposed to go to. So that's one thing I was upset about. And then as I'm registered them into the school, and mind you, let me just say that my daughter, she's 6, she's in 1st grade, and I have twin boys that are in kindergarten. 2 out of the 3 have autism. So I was actually called from the special ed department maybe a couple weeks later about only giving 2 choices of schools that they were only able to go to. Mind you, I'm coming from Haverhill, from top level 1 school. That's where my children were going to. So I was only expecting the best for them to go into a level 1 or top priority schools, significantly because of their special needs. And I was thrown between 2 schools that I don't even know of. I basically, threw out and said, okay, just pick this one, Jackson Man, because that's what they said there was a top autistic school for. From the moment of not getting any paperwork to finding out if they were going to that school, because I was still getting papers from Up Academy, from the choice school that they were picked to last minute bus routes. It was very disorganized, let me just say this. I've never experienced this type of displeasureedness from coming into the school, registering the school, my kids not knowing who their teachers are, not knowing calling them. I was very displeased. Not only that, but the location of the school so far away from my kids. I mean, they have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we live in Dorchester and they're in Austin. And then to find out that that school is like a level 3, 4, that's not top performing at all, and I'm very displeased with that. I'm displeased with everything. Like, I don't even know where to start and begin, because I can't even go to sleep at night. I'm really taking them out of the school, because I'm very displeased about the education that they have gotten so far, and the results I have gotten from the wallpaper tearing in schools, from the principal. I attended a meeting as well. I'm not just not showing up. The principal saying the lunch is not good, so I need answers, because I'm not getting anywhere. I'm very displeased about a lot of things: transportation, the special ed department, conversions of the IEP a month later, throw them into a different classroom. I mean, it goes on and on, but I'm very displeased.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Superintendent?
Yeah. Ms. Payne, Lisa Harvey from our engagement office will speak to you and see how we can help. She's right in the back.
She'll be in the back of the room for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Neal. That concludes our speakers for general public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Our first action item this evening is membership dues to the National School Board Association for school year 2017-18 in the amount of $12,975. Are there any questions or comments from school board, from school committee members on that? I believe, Dean Robinson, you have attended a number of those conferences and professional development, among other members of the committee. Sorry, I'll let you get back.
Yes, and I do very much approve of the great resource that the National School Board Association provides for our professional development, for our sense of sanity, knowing that there are others in the field with large districts grappling with complex issues. So I encourage my fellow members, if you're able, to attend in San Antonio. That's the next conference that we should definitely look into.
Thank you, Dean Robinson. Any other questions or comments from the committee on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the payment of the National School Board Association membership dues as presented. Is that a motion, Dr. Iriarte? Thank you.
Second.
For a second, thank you, Dean Coleman. Any discussion or objection? Any objection to approve the motion by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the motion carries. Our next action item is the collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the Boston Teachers Union. You will recall at our last meeting, Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Human Capital, Emily Quazalbash, and Managing Director for Long-Term Planning, Erica Giampietro, presented the committee with an overview of the agreement. They are both approaching now to come up to answer any additional questions. I do want to also say to my fellow members that this evening, as we have been meeting, the Boston Teachers Union did ratify the contract from their viewpoint by a vote of their membership. So that happened as we have been meeting. And And so before I invite the team to speak, Owen Emma Lawrence, our Chief Financial Officer as well. Superintendent, do you have any opening comments to make?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So tonight, we are asking the school committee for your vote to support a 2-year collective bargaining agreement with the Boston Teachers Union. We believe this agreement is an important step towards a more long-term contract addressing many of the issues that we have consistently prioritized and have not yet resolved, and allows teachers and administrators to begin the school year with our collective focus and energy concentrated on the needs of our kids. So if you have any questions, our team is here to answer those questions before you take a vote.
And I will state that this is in fact 2 separate discussions. It can be one discussion, but it is actually 2 separate votes. The first is on potentially ratifying the agreement itself, and then the second, if we do ratify the agreement, then the second would be on a supplemental appropriation request to the city to finance this year's cost for the contract. The city will directly pay last year's contract cost. We would have to make a supplemental request that would go from us and then from the city council for the city to pay for this year's cost, which would be an additional amount in our body budget, and the finance team can discuss that in more detail. I just want to let out to members it's actually 2 specific requests. Ladies? Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know if you want to make any additional comments. So open it up to any questions or comments from members on this. I would like to ask, since I don't see any questions being asked, I would like to ask, could you just please highlight for us the specific cost of the contract over the course of the 2 years? And then explain about the supplemental request, please.
Yeah. The cost of the contract over the 2 years is in fiscal 17, $11.5 million, and in fiscal 18, $31.1 million. That includes both the wage items and the other additional provisions. I think your second question, Chairman O'Neill, is about the vote. In context with that, the FY17 component of this will be funded directly by the city. The FY18 component is what is up for vote tonight, to request that supplemental funding for the FY18 budget.
And then effectively, these costs get added to our ongoing run rate, right? So we will have to consider this, in effect, I think the term you typically use, Ms. Lawrence, is the maintenance budget moving forward. Could you address that for a second, please?
Yes. As we begin our FY19 planning, which we've actually begun to do already, believe it or not, even though we're in the first full week of school, this will increase the base off of which we begin thinking about how much our costs are going up for next year. So that is a significant increase in our cost basis for FY19.
Okay, and do you have any preliminary thoughts on how that's going to impact the financial planning?
We don't have a lot of information about our revenue picture yet for FY19. As you know, we continue to navigate complicated fiscal environments at the state and federal level. This is not an inexpensive contract. It will add $31 million to the base, as you said, the run rate off of which we begin thinking about next year's costs.
Which is approximately, our run rate is approximately $1 billion.
1.2.
1.2,
yeah.
Thank you.
And so it does continue to add some fiscal pressure to us as we think from a multi-year perspective. At this point, we are reasonably confident as we can be with the limited information that we have at our fingertips, that while it adds some pressure, it doesn't give us overly deep concerns for what FY19 will look like. We've continued to enjoy the mayor's support and commitment. And as we've said many times, he has continued, the city has continued to fill the hole for stagnant state and local funding.
Thank you. And the overall cost of this contract is approximately 5.55%. The 2% plus the 3% plus the other costs net out some savings that we have in it.
Right. And we're looking at $42.6 million across the 2 years.
And it comes out, that's what, 5.55?
I don't have that exact percentage with me, but it's something like that would be.
It's right in that range, okay. And relatively speaking, for a 2-year contract?
The average our last contract, which was a 4-year contract, averaged 2% on wages. It had far fewer supplemental cost items, so this is a more expensive contract.
Actually, if I remember correctly, in the last, because we had 2 3-year contracts, and we had one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I think it was 001, 2, 3, 3. I think it had gone over the 6 years. Do you remember, Mr. Lecanto?
Yeah, I just looked at this, I think it was 01233, which averages to 2 over a 6-year period.
0, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3.
Yes.
And this is 2, 3.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members on this, Dean Coleman?
I do want to make a comment, and one of the things that I'm extremely pleased with the respectful way in which this negotiation's been engaged on both sides in terms of thinking about how we can continue to attract and retain a high-quality teaching force, which, as far as research as I know, is critical to our ability to serve our children. And I thought this was a children-focused outcome, and although expensive, I think it's what's absolutely necessary for us to be able to continue to be a high-performing district. So I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing to make sure this is going forward. And I look forward to this positive approach with the negotiation with the union as a great start, and I think I hope we can continue that.
Thank you, Dean Coleman. Any other questions or comments from members? I do just want to state in light of Dean Coleman's comments that ESI, as we stated last week, that this was a reasonable alternative to strike a 2-year deal with the union, get a fresh start on the negotiating teams. It does not in any way minimize that we do have some serious differences still on the table that we were unable to reach agreement on this year. And the negotiating team will be going right back to the table, and we'll be discussing these issues seriously to continue, as Dean Coleman said, I'm now paraphrasing you, but we're focused on having the best teachers in front of every student every day in every classroom, and working on that in the contract so that we have the ability to do that is of paramount importance to this committee. That's safe to say. Thank you. So if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the Boston Teachers Union, Local 66, American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO. This includes teachers, paraprofessionals, substitutes, and applied behavioral analysts, effective September 1st, 2016 through August 31st, 2018, as presented. Is there a motion? Thank you, Dean Robinson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dean Coleman. Any discussion or objection? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila?
Yes.
Ms. Regina Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Uriarte?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our final action item is a fiscal year 18 supplemental appropriation request to cover the cost of the BTU agreement in the amount of $31,122,743. A cost out of the financial is found in tonight's package, and that's what we just discussed. At this time, Superintendent, do you have any comments about the cost of the contract?
I do not.
Any questions or discussions with the financial team on the cost of the contract? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 18 supplemental appropriation to the Boston City Council in the amount of $31,122,743 to cover the cost of the 2016-18 collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the Boston Teachers Union, Local 66, American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO, as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Dean Robinson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. Any discussion or objection? Mr. Lecanto was you who seconded, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sullivan, any discussion or objection? Hearing none, Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila?
Yes.
Ms. Regina Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Uriarte?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And I would just like to say at the end of this, first of all, thank you to the superintendent and his negotiating team who's represented here in front of us for your hard work and very, very, very long hours over the last 18 months, 2 years. Right? You put a lot of time and effort into this, so thank you for doing that. It is nice to be at a nice place with the Boston Teachers Union right now. It is somewhat ironic. We were actually planning on honoring the retiring President of the retired President of the Boston Teachers Union, Mr. Richard Studman, along with Mr. Conley and other members of his senior team who retired last year. It was on the agenda to do it tonight. They actually wanted to attend the BTU vote, so they weren't able to attend tonight, but we are scheduling it for October. This is a great way to honor them, right? To go out with the contract, as well as the new incoming, or the now president of the BTU, Ms. Jessica Tang, who the superintendent is working very hard at having a close working relationship with. You saw it in a number of pictures with the superintendent on opening day. So we still have a lot of work to go as we start negotiating right away for a contract that expires next summer. But thank you very much for the team. I also want to particularly thank Mr. Lecanto, who represented all of us in all of these negotiations and discussions and working with the team, both the negotiating team and interacting with City Hall as well. So thank you, Mr. Lecanto, for the effort that you did for your fellow members. And so thank you. Great work. Now get back to the table.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course, absolutely.
I want to thank the three of you for the clarity with which you share complex information. For those of us who don't live this every day, it really is remarkable how well you do, and I want to thank you for it.
Yes.
There were four of the team who were here, so thank you to each of you who worked on this. We know the long hours that you put in on behalf of the district, and take the weekend off and then start negotiating next week. Not till Friday afternoon, by the way. So, thank you very much. We'll move on to our first presentation. This is a report on at-risk low-performing schools. At this point, I'd like to invite Dan Anderson, who is the Executive Director of Strategy, and Shara Dukovic, Program Manager of the Office of Turnaround and Transformation. Please step forward to the presentation. But first, I'd like to ask Superintendent Chang, do you have any opening comments?
Yes, very quickly. Tonight, at the request of the school committee, Dan Anderson from our Office of Strategy, and Shara Dukovic from our Office of Turnaround and Transformation, bless you, will provide an overview on how we are supporting our lowest performing schools. We want to thank the school committee for making an investment in these schools beyond the budget allocation for this fiscal year, and tonight we're going to share with you work we are currently doing to engage with those schools this school year. We are not only looking at level 4 and 5 schools, we are also looking at our level 3 schools. We are absolutely energizing our efforts to support these schools, and I'm looking forward to this presentation and your questions that you may have. And they're also joined by our Deputy Superintendent of Strategy, Dr. Don Muncy, who will be available to answer any questions as well.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dr. Chang. Thank you for having us. My name is Dan Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Strategy in the Office of Strategy.
And I'm Shara Dukovic, the Program Manager for the Office of Turnaround and Transformation.
As Dr. Chang mentioned, this is a presentation following a presentation that you received last year on our level 4 schools. And so as we think about some of our schools that are designated or viewed as low performing by the state, that includes the level 4 schools that have been designated that you heard about previously, and the level 3 schools that we're looking at in the bottom 1st through 10th percentile statewide in accountability metrics. This is using the 2015-16 school year accountability data, which is the most recent accountability data that we have from the State Department of Education.
To briefly review the current accountability system that we've had in place since 2010, the graphic that you're seeing is from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The top 80% of schools statewide receive levels 1 and 2, and the bottom 20% will receive a level 3, 4, and 5. Level 4 schools are identified as a subset of level 3 schools by the commissioner. And schools that are not able to make progress while they're level 4 schools can also be designated level 5. Currently, Boston has 47 level 3 schools, 9 level 4 schools, and 2 level 5 schools that are operated by a receiver chosen by the state. So level 3 schools cannot just be designated based on overall performance compared to other schools in the state. They can also be designated level 3 if certain subgroups in the school are among the 20 lowest the 20% lowest performing in the state. And this is compared to other schools that serve similar grades of students, so comparing all elementary schools statewide and all high schools statewide. Schools will also be designated level 3 if they have persistently low graduation rates, so below 70%, or if they score high enough to be level 2 schools but have a very low assessment participation, and that bar is currently 90%.
We also know that the state accountability system is anticipating some change. So again, we are basing these on 2015, 2016 accountability measures. BPS currently has several level 3 schools in the bottom 1st through 5th percentile, which we've listed here. One of them is a former level 4 school, the Blackstone Elementary. And then similarly, we have a list of BPS level 3 schools that are in the 6th through 10th percentile. And in the slide that you're looking at, the number next to the school name is the current percentile rank assigned by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. One thing we want to be very sure we are looking at is the demographic breakdown of our schools that are deemed lowest performing. In particular, as we think about our BPS strategic problem of practice, which is focused on how we serve our most marginalized students. So here we have information on schools from the 1st through 5th percentile compared to the Boston Public Schools average. So you'll notice that the bottom column is a percentage point difference between these 1st through 5th percentile level 3 schools and the BPS district average. So for example, you'll see that Black students make up 9.3 percentage points larger proportion of students in the 1st through 5th percentile level 3 schools than they do in Boston Public Schools as a whole. And similarly, Asian and white students are over 7 percentage points a smaller proportion in these schools, these 1st through 5th percentile level 3 schools than they are in BPS overall. We similarly have a 7.4 percentage point higher representation of students with disabilities in these schools. One of the data sources that we have to look at both level 4 schools and this subset of level 3 schools in the 1st through 5th percentile are monitoring site visits, or MSVs. And this is a specific protocol. The level 4 schools each receive a monitoring site visit annually as a result of their designation in level 4 by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So this is mandatory for them, it's required. It's conducted by the American Institutes of Research, AIR, on behalf of ESE. Sorry about all the acronyms. And for the level 3 schools in the 1st through 5th percentile, these are not mandated by ESE. The BPS used grant funds in order to undertake these MSVs as a formative measure for us to be able to make some comparisons and for us to be able to plan effectively, giving schools in this group really relevant information that gives it from the same lens that the state would be giving it so that they can plan, assess their own performance in various areas and address any areas that need to be addressed. A few key takeaways. We're going to delve into the data in more detail that gives you information on what these MSVs discovered, but we want to give a couple of key points that you can see woven in throughout. So some of the most significant needs are in core instruction and intervention. BPS struggling schools tend to struggle with the same challenges. We didn't necessarily see a wide variation in which areas were showing the most need for growth across schools. There were actually similarities across the schools. BPS level 4 schools show improvement on overall performance over time. So we actually see that from the first year of MSVs, which is from the designation year, so the year that the school is designated level 4, before they've written and engaged in a turnaround plan, from that benchmark, they actually do improve in what we're seeing in general over the MSVs. And the level 3 schools selected in this group, their performance mirrors the performance or the assessment on the MSVs of the first year level 4 schools. So that is of the level 4 schools the year that they are designated. And that's as examined by AIR during the MSVs.
You're currently looking at a summary of results from all 19 MSVs, organized by each school's strengths in the 4 Massachusetts turnaround practice areas. So these are areas of practice identified by the state as common strengths for schools that are able to make rapid gains in student performance over a short period of time. I'll walk you through what you're seeing on this graphic and then share some of the initial takeaways that we've had from looking at this data as a district. So the 4 columns represent the 4 turnaround practice areas. The first is leadership, shared responsibility, and professional collaboration. And the general unifying theme for practices in this area are how adults in the building are collaborating together and how leadership and responsibility is distributed among staff, not just at the principal level. The second area is intentional practices for improving instruction. So these involve strategies that the school is using to constantly improve teacher practice and help teachers improve the quality of their instruction as a group. The third practice area, that third column, is student-specific supports and instruction to all students. So this area relates to how well student needs are identified and interventions deployed and then monitored. And also in this area are practices relating specifically to supports for English language learners and students with disabilities. The fourth area is school culture and climate, and this refers not only to student culture in the school, but to the quality of adult-student relationships and the practices that the school is using to engage with families in the community. There are 5 ratings that AAR uses to overall assess practice in each of these 4 areas. The lowest one would be limited evidence, and I'll just say we have no schools that received this rating on any turnaround practice area this year. That would indicate that the school had little or no planning or strategies in place related to that practice area. The next 2 ratings that you'll see make up a number of our schools are developing and providing. That's the red and the yellow. Developing indicates that the school does have plans and strategies relating to this area, but they're not yet able to implement all of them effectively. And providing indicates that the school is implementing some of them, but those systems aren't yet school-wide or self-sustaining. So some of the things that we noted when we started reflecting on this data, the first is that student-specific supports and instruction to all students is the clearest growth area for the district overall and for the schools that were assessed. And the next most significant growth area would be school culture and climate, but we also noted that all of the schools that are still developing in this area are also developing in student-specific supports. So that, for us, reinforces how much of a key area those 2 are. We also noted that the fewest schools were given the top 2 ratings of sustaining and coherent implementation for intentional practices for improving instruction. And that's at least partially due to schools' performance on the instructional observation portion of the monitoring site visit. So as part of this 2-day visit to the school, the researchers conduct a number of classroom observations, and those observations will influence the school's overall rating in this turnaround practice area. So we do not yet have all of our schools performing as we would hope on the areas assessed by that classroom observation, and that's in part why we don't see as much strength there yet. One positive thing to note is that the 3 schools that have the top 2 ratings in multiple turnaround practice areas, the Channing, the Grew, and the English High School, all 3 of those schools are actually current level 4 schools that have been working very hard to implement a turnaround plan for multiple years. So we are seeing that they have made progress in those areas over the period of time that they've had this monitoring site visit. So in each of these turnaround practice areas, there are a number of specific practices that the MSB assesses. We've highlighted strengths and growth areas here that were common to many, if not all, of the 19 schools receiving an MSB. And rather than go into each one, I'm just going to share a few highlights that we've noticed. So in the first turnaround practice area, leadership, shared responsibility, and professional collaboration, we noted that many schools showed strength in the use of time for professional collaboration. So how teachers and administrators are using time to work together to do lesson planning or peer observation, for example. And also in that same category, schools that did have autonomies, whether they were turnaround schools or extended learning time schools, were found to be deploying that autonomy to improve student outcomes. One other bright spot that I wanted to highlight is under that third turnaround practice area, student-specific supports. We saw many schools, including those that were still overall rated as developing in this practice area, had higher specific performance on their ability to deploy interventions to English language learners. So we were pleased to see that, considering the attention that the district has placed in that area. One growth area that was common to almost all schools was also in this turnaround practice area, and that is right below their multi-tiered system of supports. And that refers to how a school is systematically identifying student needs and then deploying differentiated supports and monitoring their progress. And closely related, we also see that teacher training to identify those needs is a growth area. So as I mentioned, part of the monitoring site visit includes a series of classroom observations using what's known as the CLASS rubric, which is a nationally used observation tool that categorizes classroom practice in 4 areas. And what you're looking at right now is a heat map which indicates to us where there were common areas of strength. This particular graphic is for the elementary schools that received the monitoring site visit, and also where there are common challenges among these schools. To give a very brief overview, we can go into more detail if you'd like, of the 4 domains here. Classroom organization refers to the productivity and the behavior management in the classroom. We saw common strengths among schools here. The emotional support domain refers to how students and teachers are interacting with each other, and the positive climate in the classroom. The instructional support domain deals with core instructional practices like the quality of feedback that a teacher is using, for example, and this was a growth area for both grade levels in the elementary schools. And student engagement, which is only assessed in upper elementary grades, also had some mixed performance, but some stronger areas there. We observed a similar pattern of strengths and challenges among middle and high schools, with the highest scores in that classroom organization domain, the most room for growth again in those core instructional practices, and somewhat more mixed levels of student engagement than we were finding in our elementary schools overall. So to highlight again, among the trends that we noticed for the 19 schools that received these, some specific practices in each domain, we saw almost all classrooms were very strong in productivity, which signals that teachers and students are actively engaged in learning activities. The content of that activity is perhaps better captured in that third column, the instructional support domain, where we're focusing on analysis and inquiry and instructional dialogue as common areas of need. And these 2 areas capture the rigor of instruction in the classroom and also the sort of student-centered nature of the classroom. And these 2 areas actually very closely align to what the district has been working on relating to cognitively demanding tasks. These 2 get at that very closely.
We also wanted to share about some of the supports that the district has been providing to schools in these groups. And in this case, we're looking at both level 4 schools and level 3 schools in the bottom 1st through 10th percentile now. For example, we convene technical assistance teams. This is a strategy that began and has primarily served the level 4 schools. They're convened out of the Office of Turnaround and Transformation, And technical assistance teams, or TATs, are meetings that we hold 3 times a year for each individual level 4 school, where we convene central office staff members from all of the offices who are either supporting that school or whose work intersects with what that school is doing. And the idea is to do two things. First, to assist the school in kind of clearing the decks of anything that's getting in the way of being able to focus on instruction, to focus on student support, and to make sure that it's as easy as possible for the staff in that building to focus on what they need to be doing. The other side is also bringing together kind of a brain trust of really effective and knowledgeable staff members from central office to be thought partners with the school on some of the less technical and more adaptive challenges that the school needs to undertake on curriculum construction. We also have provided residencies from the academic response teams, which are 3 teams of experienced educators who work with schools in both groups, the level 4 schools and the first through 10th percentile level 3 schools, in order to provide coaching for teachers, teacher teams, and support for school leaders in thinking about both instructional practice and professional collaboration. So the idea behind ART is work with the teachers on their teaching and work with them on how they continue to work themselves on their teaching, so that even when ART isn't around, the teachers can continue doing work themselves on their own practice. Similarly, the Office of Data and Accountability's Data Inquiry team has conducted support for many schools in this group, 5 level 4 schools and 8 level 3 schools in this category, to work with them on not just how do you look at data, but how do you do it to really think about and adjust instructional practice in teams within the school, both instructional leadership teams, and individual content and grade level teams at the schools. The district also worked to provide strategic support grants for some of these level 3 schools. These are not large grants akin to the larger school redesign grants that level 4 schools receive to fund a turnaround plan. These are smaller targeted grants. They were very individual based on the specific needs and applications of the individual schools. But a couple of the things that they also supported included these formative monitoring site visits in these schools and extra seats for students in acceleration academies to provide direct service to students. This year, we anticipate continuing these supports, all of those that were listed, and thinking about other central office interventions as needed. We also are working on bringing together a broad array of district leadership team members and central office staff members from all levels to come up with to work in a cross-functional group on a few goals. The scope of work includes establishing a consistent diagnostic process for assessing need in low-performing schools, and then coordinating central office supports for those schools to directly address the diagnosed needs. So just as we talked about multi-tiered systems of supports for students, we could think of this sort of as multi-tiered system of support for schools to make sure that we're not treating school supports as one size fits all any more than we would want to for students, but really identifying what are the specific supports that an individual school needs, and then channeling the right resources or central office expertise to those schools. We also want to establish a little bit of a toolkit of viable and effective school models. What are the things that are really working? And that gets at intervening in these schools before there's an opportunity for a designation. So just as we started to look at this data, and just as the visits help us think about what are the criteria that the state looks at, and what can we learn from that in terms of making sure that all of our schools that are level 3 schools are addressing central areas that they need to, so that we can look ahead and not wait for a designation, but use this formative information to figure out what schools need now and support and give them that support. Thank you very much. That concludes our presentation. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Open up now to questions and comments. Steve Robinson.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And I enjoyed working closely with your team on some of the different turnaround teams. And so I've seen up close and personal the hard work that you all are doing, so thank you. So my question is, I guess, one of the questions that I typically ask a lot, and that's regarding parent engagement. So if you were talking to a group of, not policymakers, but parents who attend one of these schools, and you could answer the question on slide 10. So the turnaround practice ratings. If I'm a parent at one of these schools, is there a way that you can answer the question, how can I as a parent impact my school in one of these areas the most? I know in the school climate culture underneath it, you have family and parent engagement. But if I'm an engaged parent at one of these schools and I want to help increase the status of my school, I want to do whatever I can for not just my child, but my child's classroom. I want to support the teacher. I want to support the principals. I want to show up. I want to be educated. Are there some thoughts just around how parents can be one of these critical stakeholders? Because I see the work that has to get done by your team, by the teachers. The teachers mostly. But if you have a set of engaged parents at every school who say we want to help fix this problem, have you thought about a strategy, a plan? Is it already implemented? I'd love to hear it.
Let me start, and then please ask. I would look forward to you, Dan, and sure adding, or any of the instructional superintendents who are here to also contribute as well. In your question, I think there's an implication that parents can be involved beyond just that one category.
Right.
And so whether it is about helping to improve the overall leadership of the school, maybe participating in instructional leadership team, or helping to support intentional practice on improving instruction, such as parents being part of instructional rounds at schools, there are roles for parents to play. The deliberateness of parent engagement in the turnaround practice themselves are outlined in the turnaround plans. There are opportunities absolutely for parents to be involved across all these different turnaround practices. And many of our schools do have parents involved in many aspects of the turnaround plan, not just how do you improve school climate and culture.
There are a couple things that I would add to that I'm really excited about. So one of the things we've been working to do over the last couple of years is build stronger relationships within central office so that these supports are coming together on behalf of schools. So for example, the Office of Turnaround and Transformation, the Academic Response Teams, and the Office of Engagement School Support Team, and I think with they as lead partner of the three. In this instance, for example, came together in one of our level 4 schools and worked together to host a walkthrough for parents, the parents walking through classes, but not necessarily in a traditional parent walkthrough. We actually worked with parents so that they got to learn the same rubrics that the instructional coaches were using with the schools. And so I believe actually they used, for example, we were looking at student discourse, which is another way of saying the instructional dialogue element on the class rubric. So if we think about how we're really building conceptual understanding for students and not just procedural fluency, we really want to have students talking about what they're learning and not just answering questions, but really talking about the underlying concepts of what they're learning. And so the walkthrough had parents using this same kind of look that the instructional coaches would use. And so that was a great opportunity that I was really excited to see these teams take to with parents really to kind of get them all the way behind the curtain and let them see the full view of what we're thinking about in terms of instructional practice at the cutting edge. And
Dean Robinson, I have to interrupt. I know you're in the middle of talking, but I'm very conscious of the fact that you are actually a parent of a child of a school that's on this list. So does that resonate with you as a parent? Is that what you're hearing from your school, which happens to, or one of your children's schools that counts you on this list?
It is, and I know that I'm not alone in wearing the engaged parent hat at schools, and so that's why I'm asking if the scope can be broadened to more than just the school climate and culture that parents are engaged in. I would love to know if there is a superintendent, I know you said there is a turnaround, family engagement is in the turnaround plan for schools. I'd love to know if there's a district-wide strategic plan for ways to increase parent engagement and education. Because I don't think this is just about engaging parents, but many of them need to understand ILTs, and they need to understand more than just the role that a typical parent can play in a typical school, because there are parents who want to really help participate in turning around their school. So that's why I don't know if it's district-wide, and if there's a cohesive plan, or if it's just school by school. But I'd love to just dig down deeper, because I think that parents are a really critical stakeholder in turning around schools. I believe it in my bones, I just do. So I want to know that we are thinking creatively, innovatively, broadly, deeply, and parents' voices are at that table at the schools to say, we want to help turn it around and we have some ideas.
We hear you. We do have work to do there. I will say there is some foundational work that we did this summer. Last week, we brought to you the Essentials for Instructional Equity. There is a parent guide to those essentials. I discuss how parents can support the teaching and learning that's tied to those competencies. So
It's given to all the parents?
yeah, that's something that is part of our overall strategy. We make sure all parents become aware of what those essentials really say.
Okay, and language support too if needed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do you want to, thank you, Ms. Oliver.
Thank you. I ditto what Dean Robinson is saying, and I think it's good to have the guidebook, but it's a bigger question, and it's always more work, involving families. It just is. It's more steps, it's more resources, but in my experience involving families, that is the key to the work that we need to do, which leads me to my question. On slide 11, thank you for all of this information. This is what we asked for last year, so I appreciate the thoroughness of your explanations and the time that you took to put it together, so thank you. My question is, I have two questions. This is my first one, is if you could talk a little bit about, you said the overall strengths were family and community engagement, but yet the growth areas are adult-student relationships and school-wide behavior plan. And I'm just trying to understand that, because usually when you have good family engagement and community engagement, then usually that translates into the school day in terms of what's happening with students and behavior. So I'm just trying to understand how it could be in the strength and in the growth, because it would seem that, in my experience, those things kind of go together. So I'm just trying to understand a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I would share your question looking at this data. Part of it has to do with the way the monitoring site visit is structured. It really is looking at what the practices of the teachers and administrators, and to some extent the students in the building are doing. It's not as robust a tool for assessing family engagement from the family's perspective. So one thing I just want to call out is that while we have found that this is a very useful diagnostic tool for the school, it is really looking at the strengths of the practices in terms of what's being done by the people in the building. And I'll say that the other factor of the way these reports are done is through things like interviews and focus groups with teachers who might identify strong routines in the area of family communication or community engagement, but are still working towards having that translate into really close relationships with the students. I'll also say that there were some differences between the way these indicators look at the elementary level and the way they look at the high school level, which might explain some of those differences as well. But they are relative differences. So overall, the turnaround practice rating for that particular school might contain somewhat higher ratings in family engagement and somewhat lower ratings in adult-student relationships. But overall, the fact that it hasn't impacted adult-student relationships is one of the things that keeps the overall rating somewhat lower.
So it's not from a parent perspective, parent, grandparent, whatever, which I think leads back to your comment, Dr. Chang, there's still a lot of work to do around really shifting the paradigm and how we actually work with our families, and we need to continue to put our families front and center. Thank you for clarifying that. My other question is, I wanted to know how the reports from MSB are being used to accelerate instruction, and then how are leaders being held accountable?
Can you repeat the second part of that?
Yeah, how are leaders being held accountable?
So we, in the last school year, started making sure that MSC visit reports were made available to school communities. One of the things we learned that sometimes these reports get done and they are not necessarily then brought back to school communities for reflection and for improvement. So it's, yes, so that means principal, teachers, parents, everyone. And so this is a practice that we are now instituting. So these MSD visits and the reports that come out of it are now being shared back with schools, and our instructional superintendents are working with school leaders to figure out, to determine how that data is then shared. How is that data sharing facilitated? Because that's super critical. Great, to Mary Driscoll, one of our instructional superintendents, may be able to provide some more details.
Yeah, just to give some specific examples of how we're using the data. In most cases, the visits happen in the spring, and so the data for some schools might have been available in middle of May. For some schools, they didn't actually receive the data till very close to the end of the year. So in at least one school where they had the data in May, I worked with the instructional leadership team at the school to unpack it and to begin to think about the kind of professional development that teachers might be able to engage in over the summer, and then also the kind of professional development and arc of learning that would happen for this year. We also were able to partner with the New Teacher Project and bring a group of, I don't know if it was 11 schools together this summer from this group of low-performing level 3 schools to do a more intensive 4-day professional development that really took them through how they go about instructional planning for the year, how they prioritize their time, and also did some development of our capacity as instructional superintendents then to partner with those school leaders this year in doing regular instructional walks and dips into how the work is progressing. So ultimately, as instructional superintendents, we are responsible for holding the school leaders accountable to the work and to making the progress that we all know needs to be made.
And then, I'm sorry, just going back, thank you for going back to your comment, Dr. Chang, about how everything is shared with the family. How do you know that it's being shared with families? What is the mechanism for feedback to know that that's being shared? And I think going back to Dean Robinson's point is, how is it understood? How can families share in all of this beyond like the guide that you're talking about?
So again, this year we haven't yet put into place the plan for sharing with families. What we did do last year in our level 4 schools was to hold sort of like a data family meeting to really unpack the MSV data for the level 4 schools, as well as the state accountability data, any interim assessment data that the school had either from the district's interim assessments or from a partner like ANET, and to really help the parents develop some data literacy so they knew the right questions to ask. And I have to say, I participated in those meetings at the Channing and at the Crew, at both of those schools, parents were already very data savvy before this meeting, so it was clear that in those 2 schools, that's been a regular part of the practice, that they're not hiding their challenges, they're really sharing them with parents and being very clear about here's what we're working on, here's what we're doing, and why we're doing it.
I believe that also happened at the Winthrop as well.
And I hope that practice is shared in the school model, because I wonder, some of the schools that have not fared so well, if we have this kind of process where families are part of understanding the monitoring and it's part of our structure and who we are, and that families can actually participate. Thank you.
And just to build on that comment, there's a little bit of, I would think if the high school's involving the students as well. I mean, I think back to last year when we had a parade of students from Brighton and Excel saying, we had no idea we were about to hit level 4. What does this mean? And we had folks from Matahunt saying, we had no idea we were about to go from 4 to 5. What does this mean? And that's what caused this committee to really say to you, superintendent, your team, we want to see exactly the supports you're providing, not only the 4, but to the level 3s, and what type of communication is going out. So thank you, Ms. Oliver, for pushing that question of, it's one thing for the superintendent to say, well, families are getting the monitoring site visits, but we get confused by the jargon. I can imagine how parents do, who are not paying as much attention to this as we are. And so I fully understand the parents, the Channing and the group have experienced it, and they are very engaged and good things going on in both of those schools. But we have a number here on the list, and would love to see that level of engagement across the board, and the district pushing the engagement and understanding that they have to make it happen. Because, Ms. Driscoll, when you said, teaching parents the right questions to ask, that's important, right? Helping them to understand. I want to keep moving to questions on the school conduct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Only about you, Phil. You were done, right? Okay, thank you. Mr. Locato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Dukovnik and Mr. Anderson and Ms. Driscoll for your presentation tonight. So I have a couple comments, and then I'll have a couple questions. And so first, I really appreciated slide 15 that spoke about the diversity efforts that you take to address the needs in individual schools. And I appreciate also that you highlighted the fact that this isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all type of approach. I think it's also important that you've taken a step back and gone out and sought reviews from AIR for level 3 where we're not otherwise obligated to do so. It's something that we've, I think, been highlighting for a couple of years, that we're very wary of these schools that sit at the low level 3 where we know we're teetering on the edge and we're worried about them falling over to level 4 and level 5 at some point. And so I want to ask a question that wasn't really addressed in the, that's all the good stuff. But I want to ask a question about what really wasn't addressed in the presentation and isn't necessarily something that's germane to what we do in schools. And that's, is any of the data that we're pulling out through these reports and through the work that you do when you go and you intervene in the schools in various ways, is it giving us usable data that we can take to external partners? And I don't mean community groups, I don't necessarily mean funders or any other groups like that, but specifically to other government agencies that provide the services that can support our students. So, when I say that, I think we all anecdotally understand that a lot of the issues that can drag a school down are societal issues that are socioeconomic in nature and are things that we can work to address in meaningful ways in schools, but we can't totally solve. And so I want to think about, as we're doing the work that we're doing here, is there data and information to push back out and say to the mayor, say to the governor, say to the legislature and beyond, this is what we need to help improve the lives of these students.
Thank you for your question. I think in practice, a little bit more in policy is where we're used to doing this. So I would say what we really do is use this to help each school and really take an examination of where is it that we need help, as we said. And so sometimes that involves looking at what kind of student supports is it that we really need, and are those student supports that we're already providing? And that puts us in a position to figure out the array of partnerships that we have in that individual school. Are those the right partnerships? And are those sufficient partnerships? Or are there other partnerships that we need? Do we need more mental health? Do we need more physical health? What are the areas that we need to go out and look a little bit further, and then either staff in that school or staff in that school reaching out to central office for help to see how we can get more of those partnerships through that self-diagnosis.
I'm also hearing we could probably take that to the next level as well. And it's not, you're helping us to think about what is the next step to the support of our turnaround school. Appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well. So, just a couple of thoughts here. How long, I don't think I saw anywhere in the material how long each one of these schools have sat in the various levels that they're at. So, irrespective of being at levels 3, 4, or 5, just certainly being at the 10% level or below within the state rankings, it would be helpful for us to understand that as a follow-up. I think we probably talked about it here and there, but I don't have a central place to look at that. And I asked that question because we have a variety of different approaches that that the district's using, and acknowledging again the fact that you clearly stated this isn't a one size fits all approach. What's a reasonable or how should we take a look at the approaches that we're taking school by school, and how should we take a look at each one of these schools and make a clear assessment to say, you know what, we spent a lot of time here and we need to be trying something different, or this school has been making an effort, they've been making meaningful effort, and they need a little bit more time. I think that's something that we tend to sort of react to when we see something we don't like, and I just want to know how to sort of check myself and take a measured approach in understanding why some schools are in this group longer than others.
So thank you for the question, and actually your question kind of goes to the, so let me start with the identified schools. Your question goes to the heart of the, sort of one of the difficulties with No Child Left Behind, which hasn't actually been fixed in ESSA, which is that the timeline that schools that have been labeled as significantly failing have been given to turn around before sanctions kick in to take them to the next level, which here is 3 years in Massachusetts, is at the very bottom of the length of time that research has shown that schools need to start to show beginning progress in a complete and honest and sustainable turnaround process. So the reason that your question is so apt is because we have some schools who might go out of the gate really fast because there are some early wins that you can get when you start to focus in a different way after you've written that plan and seen and looked at some of the options that are available to you. And they may sprint along and make significant progress. Some of our schools, as you can see from the list, have exited and are now back in the worrisome stage. Those schools probably went through a very, very, very authentic effort to do that, because that's the task you end up with when you have a 3-year timeline for rapid improvement. But it doesn't necessarily lead to the culture change and the commitment to, and again, this is not about an individual school. Please understand that. But you don't end up with the kinds of underlying underpinnings that lead to genuine turnaround in that kind of a context. So that's why, from my perspective, it's not a big surprise that, at least in our case, the state doesn't normally move to take a school out of turnaround after 3 years, which is the first time they would, I think, the way I understand the system, the way I would understand that they would consider that, but is waiting to see if that's a little bit more sustainable. It's the same reason why when we began our work here, finance worked with us in turnaround and agreed to help try to figure out a way for there to be a step down in resources, because the other thing that kind of is necessary for turnaround but not sufficient is that infusion of cash that comes along with this, what here is called an SRG, but what nationally is known as the School Improvement Grant. Because
And which
that-
also goes away at some point.
which goes away at the end of the 3-year period. So the step-down process that we have for schools that exit now, which we've only, used in, I think, one case at this point, is intended to make certain that schools don't immediately start to feel the pressure of needing to eliminate the staff that was hired that's led to the successful turnaround, reduce the programming and the supports to the school that are part of the work that has to happen to turn around the school. So I'm not sure I fully answered your question, but I hope that you understood. You asked the question that really still perplexes researchers really is exactly what that has to look like, because a lot of schools, not just in Boston, but nationally, do come out of the gate with a lot of rapid fire change and incremental improvement, all heading in the right direction. That kind of approach is extremely hard to sustain once the supports that were put in place to make it happen, and you all actually have raised this question and made this point in budgeting in our last conversation about the level 4 schools. I mean, it's both. Anyway, that's exactly what I was.
And absolutely, that's very helpful because, I was a bit stuttering in getting the question out because, when you're thinking about this, it's a very broad and nuanced question, and you're looking for, not a clear answer, but a context. And so the context is what we need to be able to think about, each of these schools. Just, again, the broken record statement tonight is, one size does not fit all. And I think certainly, the key phrase that came out of all of your testimony here, Dr. Muncy, is sustainability, and thinking about how we, take that initial improvement or, improvement that occurs at some point and making sure that it sticks. So, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Locanto. Dr. Uriarte.
I also want to thank you for the report. I mean, it's deep, it's well documented, it's well analyzed. I mean, it really is very helpful. And I think it answers a lot of the questions that we've been sort of struggling with in regards to when intervention should begin and what that intervention should be like. And but I wanted to go to slide number 9, which really sort of drew my, the takeaway. I have a couple of questions about them. The first one is, about, it's similar to what Michael just talked about. I mean, how long does it take? What is your best information on this? Because that tells me that even, if you're telling me 7 years, 6 years, it means that we have to start intervening in level 3 schools way before they even come up in your begin to throw light, you know what I mean? So that what are the kinds of early intervention that can be done with level 3 schools that will get us, will prevent going to level 4? I think you're doing here. I think that the most interesting sentence here is selected level 3 schools mirror the performance of the first year of level 4. That means that we're really close to, like the ones that you identified here are only, this far away from being level 4. So it tells me that we've got to start earlier. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So 2 years ago, when the first grant became available to provide supports, that we chose to use to provide supports to the lower performing level 3 schools, we asked each school to identify the starting point that they thought would make the most sense. And they identified different starting points. And if anybody that was working with them, I know Alex, we often talk about some of yours. They identified different starting points, but honestly, any starting point that the school feels is a problem area is likely a problem area. And the commitment, from my perspective, is that you have to make sure that you don't say, this is our problem and we'll fix it and then we'll be fine. The starting point is the starting point to getting to a comprehensive analysis and assessment of what's going on. And really, the next step This year, we tried we brought the process of having AIR come in and look at these 10 schools because we thought that information would help with the diagnosis, and I think it both does and it will continue to, because in the same way that Mary was talking about these reports for the low-performing level 3s came back in April, May, and June. So schools are using them now to start thinking about what they're going to do. But there's almost no, I don't think there's any, so I've worked for 15 to 18 years studying high school reform and looking at high schools that were struggling and approaches they took to reform. There's never one thing that has to be fixed and the school will be on its way to being better. But whatever one part you enter with has to be the basis of a comprehensive analysis. So that point is, I think, my big point that I want to make, but I want to give Alex an opportunity.
But my question is, it's not necessarily about those that are already at level 4. It's
no, it's the same for level 3.
They're not appearing here.
Right.
Because the ones that are appearing here look a lot like level 4 already.
They do. So if this I'm still learning Massachusetts system. So if I say something wrong, jump in. The vast percentage of 80 percentage points that means you're fine, and 20 suddenly that means that you're at risk is an unusual. It mirrors the federal law, but it's not the way that other places that I've worked or studied have identified schools in need of support. So the last year you asked us to come back and talk about the level 3 schools because we had really started to commit to doing that work. We have a lot to do at this level, and we have a large number of schools that fall into this category, but in that group of schools that are somewhere between the 20th and the 40th percentile, we're going to be able to see the seeds of the issues that become. Right, exactly. It's a question of how we do all that. We have a large number of schools in this particular.
I know that this comes up, this whole situation comes up a lot during the discussion of the budget.
Yes.
I mean, I know for me, it is heartbreaking to, see level 3 schools getting budget cuts, and so that I would like, maybe that you come back. But the idea here is, if you're telling us that it takes a lot longer than the state gives you the funding for, or that the state allows the window of implementation for, we should be able to try to prevent, for example, budget cuts, schools that are marginal, trying to implement, what I saw is that most, you provide level 3 schools a lot of the same interventions as you provide level 4, except for TAT. So maybe, increasing more TAT to level 3 schools. But again, I mean, I think for the discussion of the budget in regards to the school piece, this is critical. It's critical to understand how do we support and not be part of the problem in cutting back funding for schools that are level 3.
Let me add to that. We will also need to add, we need to also understand the confluence between choice and its impact on these schools as well, because we do have a choice system, and so the budget effects on our schools are all due to enrollment, not just, it's not that they're experiencing cuts. It's that with decreasing enrollment, there is decreasing resources available to the school. So we need to understand the confluence between choice and also resources and also performance. And so all that needs to be understood.
I think we discussed that in depth in the last budget, because it became so apparent that, it's like a slippery slope. Once, the school gets determined to be level 3, parents put their kids, and that's the best reason to become level 4, right? That, that's part of the dynamic, so that I understand we have to see everything at once, but we also have the power of acting in a different way. And I think that what I'm asking is, what is the different way in which we have to act so that money goes out, provides support to those schools that are gonna need it the most? You don't have to answer right now, but I'm gonna come back to you.
I have no doubt about that.
We have the budget in front of us, okay?
Well, Dr. Uriarte, I will say that you're absolutely right. This was a big topic of conversation us last February and March during the budget, particularly when it became apparent to us that financial decisions that are made on choice, made on enrollment, were particularly hurting a subset of schools, and we collectively as a body get very concerned about that. And if you recall, when we were able to get some more funding for the schools, one of the things that we collectively said to the superintendent was set some money aside that are particular supports for level 3 and level 4. And not just 4, but for level 3s, and that we want to see how you're using them. So what I'm pleased in seeing this, and I think we're all very pleased with this report, this is the concrete data of exactly what the district is doing, and none of this is based on enrollment. None of, if you know, at least as I interpret it, all the additional supports that are provided nowhere says, well, they get X amount of this because they're this size. It's the district kind of taking a separate pool of money that they're putting into technical assistance teams and academic response teams and data inquiry team and so on and so forth, that are separate from the enrollment issue that we all highlighted a concern as. So I'm actually encouraged by seeing this, and I personally think it's a little bit of a direct result of how we approached it last year, and quite frankly, I think the issue that had come up the year before, but this year in particular, we collectively really said to the superintendent, you have to set money aside for these low-performing level 3s and level 4s.
Well, and the reason we have this report on level 3s is that we've been saying that,
Do it earlier for us, show us earlier.
on level 3. I have one more question, which is broader, just get your opinion, your thinking. I've been reading a lot about, I've been reading about turnarounds and the different strategies. And there is like a thread of research right now saying that sort of dismantling schools are not the best way to go about turning around a school. Can I just get your feedback? Because I think the state of Massachusetts has gone the way of sort of undoing most schools. And when I think about Brighton and Excel, that's sort of the way that we proceeded with this. But what is your thinking about this new research that's coming?
Dr. Uriarte, can I ask you just maybe clarify, when you say dismantle, which you...
Take the teachers away, change the principal, totally change the instructional practice in the school?
Do you want to talk about SIG research?
So the overall...
Are you familiar with that research?
I may not be familiar with exactly what you're talking about, but the one thing that has come out of the federal government and different arms of the federal government can mean a lot of researchers to study the impact of SIG. And overall, the results are not in SIG meaning school improvement grant funding. So providing extra money, no matter which model was selected, has not actually demonstrated a tremendous amount of efficacy in solving the problems that are there underlying schools that are in need of drastic improvement on the whole. There's a lot of controversy around the question of whether turnaround, which is having everyone reapply for their jobs, is the best strategy. Most people feel like you should. I think, and so if what you're reading contradicts this, it would be good to know also so I can read it, but that's a strategy that you take in a school with many, many challenges that's persistently been unable to improve. And just the way in which our level 4 schools end up designated, and as you can see just from the number of schools that are sort of, in a not very nice way to say it, lined up to go into level 4, is that the problems that become apparent as the school is working on its turnaround plan after being named level 4 are clearly there when the school is higher performing, right? And the impact on achievement is what increases as the problems don't get addressed. I mean, that's one way to think of it. So, don't know the exact research.
The articles that I read and sent.
I'd also like to just say one thing, because I don't want the misperception related to exiting level 4. So it's been my understanding from the conversations we've had over the past 2 years with the representatives from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that not exiting at the end of 3 years but making progress so that you're not at risk of being identified to go into level 5 is a perfectly acceptable place to be. Okay, because you're not making that sky-high improvement that above that, but you're making steady incremental progress. And so we do have schools, and we will get through all that information, who've been in level 4 for significant length of time, gradually improving. But that gradual improvement over the long haul generally does, and this is again, different types of research on school reform, does generally mean that a genuine change in school culture is taking place, right? Because culture doesn't shift in a day. And so that model is ending up going through 2 or 3 cycles of 3 years before you're ready to exit is also something that you can look across the country and see in different
And I can think of one particular high school in Boston that has been making that gradual improvement, and we continue to wait for the state to catch up with what we all know has been that strong improvement at that school. I'm looking at a senior official over here who has run that school for several years. But we'll wait for the state to catch up to what we know is going on. Before I go to Dean Coleman, Dean Robinson, I think you had one quick follow-on.
Just a follow-up. Thank you, Dr. Uriarte, because you were highlighting some of the key challenges that I think I'm still stuck on. I know we don't have a one-size-fits-all model. I know that there's more to do to engage parents as stakeholders, but when I see slide 9 that says BPS struggling schools tend to struggle with the same challenges, those same challenges have the same stakeholders at every school, and I'm trying to understand how we close the opportunity and achievement gap if at the struggling schools with the same challenges, and we're trying to be proactive in looking at level 3 schools. I guess is Dr. Uriarte's question, what is that something different that we need to try? And it might not be an answer now, but we need to think about some more innovative practices, because I really wrestle with that statement that the struggling schools tend to struggle with the same challenges. We have a short period of time to turn them around. What can we do more of? In my mind, there's just something, I just think parents have a critical piece in helping to solve some of these challenges. And I want to keep asking the question of how can we engage parents differently more, because those parents are still at the schools beyond 3 years. Many times I think that they want to be a part of the solution and not the problem.
I think that is, I think that is the question we ask schools who are going through a turnaround process. What will you radically do different at the schools? And if you look at the data, it also says that the most significant lead is in core instruction and intervention. So, for example, in our work with Brian Excel, it wasn't just about more resources to do the same thing. It is more resources to do something that's radically different. And so we are anxious to see what the new programming that is provided because of bringing in linked learning, what that will do to actually transform core instruction. So in both of those schools, their curricular offerings was very traditional. But with linked learning, we are going to be bringing in very different approaches to curriculum design and to pedagogy. And so having Buck Institute, which focuses on project-based learning, do the professional development, the 2-week professional development for each school during the summer, what's already beginning to inspire the staff of both those schools to really rethink the type of delivery of curriculum and delivery of content to students. And so what I'm hearing from you, and I think I want to just reinforce with the team here, is that let's continue pushing on this idea of we do need to do something very different, because we don't do something very different that impacts core instruction, you're going to pretty much get the same results. And when that funding will ultimately dries up, then there's not really any sort of sustainable change. So,
And I agree with you, but if the core instruction changes and it becomes creative, are we also reconsidering how we partner with parents and that core instruction? So as we're thinking OAG work, is it being implemented in some of these creative strategies to close those opportunity gaps? So that's what I want to push on, that in the classroom, there's always innovation taking place. We hear it, we have great partners who want to shift the classroom learning, but are we also creatively thinking about, can parents be oriented to this learning and things of that nature?
I apologize for not delving into that. In specifically to Brian Excel, when you use more authentic type of tasks, when there are more performance tasks, there's so many more opportunities for parents to actually engage. Because when the type of tasks students are expected to do is traditional, like take information from a lecture, answer questions on multiple choice tests. It's a very different experience for parents to be involved in that, as opposed to a young person that takes in content and has to create a way to solve a community problem based on that information. There's a lot more opportunities for not only parents, but also the greater community to be engaged in the learning process with young people. So that's why we're really driving more of this sort of authentic approach to instruction. Now, I think our challenge is making sure that we are still being accountable to the state on some of these traditional metrics. And that's ever evolving work. And those are discussions that are not only happening in the city, but happening nationally.
Thank you, Dean Robinson. Dean Coleman.
Great, thank you very much for the report. I really, a couple things I really want to highlight, things that I think are very fascinating. The multi-tiered approach, the focus on instruction, and also the proactive approach to risk. But I want some help understanding, and I want to build on some things my colleagues suggested, the difference between slide 30 and slide 7. So slide 7, when you talk about the demographics, BPS levels of these schools, it almost looks, there's some ethnic difference between district as a whole and the schools we're talking about, but then the economic differences look like aren't particularly large. But then on slide 30, when you look at slide 30, you look at the average, as you go from level 1 with an average of 44 down to level 5, where the average of economics is 66, it seems to be a huge economic impact on the performance of the school. So some of the questions that I would like to get clarity on, as Dr. Uriarty suggested, what's the impact of our assignment system on the distribution of demographics by level?
So we can't answer that question tonight, but it's partly tied up in the equity analysis that we're in the process. So, but I agree, we're noting the question.
But I think, but that just jumps out. And the other, and even though I want to be clear that I'm very excited the strategy is being used, but echoing Mr. Lecanto and others earlier, it seems to me because you have this class differentiation, the lack of what I'll call public health strategy as primary to our conversation is of concern. So public health, issues of vision, dental, nutrition, exercise. We talk about having trauma informed, but the role of class, economic disadvantage, and the experience of trauma, and the acuity score that we're talking about. That I want to argue that we need to have a much more articulate, focused strategy around those public health issues as core to this conversation and not secondary. And then in that, what point does these public health issues drive differentiation? If we do a multi-tier support to school different, how is race, class, disadvantage part of our way of differentiating?
If I just may quickly comment, I look forward to having a conversation with this school committee in upcoming months. I'm looking at Eleanor on this one. About how do we further differentiate funding for schools based on local factors such as parent education, poverty rate, experiences with trauma, and if there are ways to even further differentiate how we should fund schools based on those factors. If there is interest in this school committee to have that discussion, we would be glad to help guide that conversation.
And completely, but also, but in that differentiation, what is the strategy?
That's of course.
What are the effective public health, public health strategies that we think will work? And how are we going to articulate those?
What are those menu of services in the city that we can provide to schools to choose from based on funding that we can provide to them based on all these other factors?
And so Mr. Plato, who are other partners who have resources for this funding that we need to partner more with a more focused?
We will be very, very excited to be able to bring that information to you. We also have done some deep analysis with many of our partners to understand what are those services that they're best at, because our schools need also guidance on how to choose partners.
Superintendent, I would like to recommend, to Dr. Coleman's point, Health and Wellness Council members, because there are already many public health, officials who are supporting that work.
So, and I'd love to see slide 30 replicated by ELL, SPED, and JACE. Just make that available so we can see it. It may look more like slide 7, but pardon me, Clint.
I was thinking that it would be a really good conversation to have with the Boston Public Health Commission. I think we underuse the community health centers and the whole architecture of community health. We have a unique gift. I mean, Boston is one of the few places in the United States that have the network of community health centers that we have. But there's like parallel universes, you know what I mean?
Parallel play.
Yeah, but I think if we're talking about the kind of support and the city can bring, different, that is one that is immediately comes to mind, you know what I mean? That really sort of cementing those relationships in a very, thriving way.
I think I should give credit to Mayor Walsh and his team. He is putting those structures in place where he's asking different departments in the state to look at their data and to see where those opportunities for overlap will be. So if we are focused on third grade reading, how can other agencies help support third grade reading proficiency? And so there is ongoing work as a city to start putting these pieces in place. So I do, because I sit in those meetings.
And can I just underscore, it is happening. It's happening on the ground level. I know I just put the plug in for the Health and Wellness Council. I'm looking at Ron Dorsey because I know that he has been building partnerships with community health center leaders, executive directors, CEOs, and the pediatricians themselves who are chomping at the bit to connect with Boston Public Schools. I know the Blackstone South End Community Health Center. There's some work that's taking place, but it would be great to see it rising to the level of data and school committee recommendations and support.
And Ford Foundation should help fund this.
And it's fascinating. It has been going on, just at the Build BPS level.
Yes.
Where the folks working on Build BPS actually asked the Boston Health Commission, how many children are being born in Boston every year? The question was never asked, well, we know they're going to be kindergartners with us in just a couple of years. right? So we're starting to cross those barriers and ask those questions that in the past you weren't able to do, and I thank Chief Dorsey and his team for doing that, as well as the superintendents. I did have a question, but I have more of an editorial comment on this. This is an area of intense interest to the district, to this committee. We have traditionally focused on the level 4s, and we have talked repeatedly about the lower performing level 3s and what supports can we provide for them. I talked a few minutes ago about what we did through the budget process with the superintendent's help, and I'm very encouraged by seeing this. But I also have to freely admit, as a policymaking board, and this is a little unusual for me to say, I have learned as much tonight from my fellow members' questions. And I hope the superintendent has been listening intently to the questions and comments as well, because I think they have been fascinating, as much as I have from the answers of the team. And like my fellow members, I thank you for the work that's being done on this. I do have a couple of quick questions. Superintendent, first of all, when the readout happens of the technical assistance teams, do you attend those readouts?
No, I do not attend those. The instructional superintendents are part of that.
I may want to encourage you to, or I do encourage you to think about attending, because they remind me, as Mr. Anderson was describing them, of the model that Miami has when they send in technical teams to look at what can we do to get cobwebs out of the way, get the underbrush out of the way to allow schools to be successful. And as much as I appreciate the instructional superintendents attending, I think the power of the superintendent sitting there saying, let's solve this problem right now, and food service or transportation or whatever it is, what can we do right now to solve this problem, would be powerful. So I would encourage you to think about attending that. You and I both heard that example in Miami, how they do that. So it's just it's a thought for you. And I was wondering if you folks could help me out a little bit with the instructional support domain. Mr. Kovnick, you did point out that that was, as you politely said, an area for improvement, I think is how you phrased it on slide 12. Particularly in the early education years, that's 3.8. But it seems across the board, it seems every single school struggle with that. So help me out with what makes that up and what we're doing about it.
So the specific domain, the specific indicators that are assessed by that domain vary a little bit between the early elementary grades, which will include things that are specific to language acquisition, like language development, but all of them hit on the quality of feedback from teachers, the depth of the content development, the depth of analysis and inquiry, and the level of student-centered dialogue. And I'll let Dan say more about this as well, but these are, and rigor as well, analysis and inquiry, specifically looking at the depth of rigor. These represent levels of approach to instruction that are quite advanced in some ways. They're not the foundational lesson planning, lesson structure, sage on the stage, and it's certainly the direction that we as a district are going. And one of the things that we have done when we've developed turnaround plans, including those for Brighton and Excel, is looked at how we can build in an approach to the programs and courses that we're offering that require that high level type of instruction rather than potentially just allow room for it. Some of the supports that are provided that we looked at on an earlier slide, the technical assistance teams, the academic response teams, data inquiry teams, all of those that touch on instruction are looking very closely at, particularly for level 4 schools, at the school's results over time in that area. And there are some schools that, with the help of their instructional superintendent, actually use the results of what's gone well and what's the greatest area of need in the instructional support domain to select their instructional focus for the next year. So in many schools, it goes right to the heart of the instructional strategies that the principal and their team implement from year to year.
We had also the power of the Essentials for Instruction Academy is that we crystallize some of these most important competencies into these 4. And the 2 that align most closely to instructional support would be design learning experiences for access and agency, and also facilitate cognitively demanding tasks and instruction. System-wide, we are providing tools and resources that help support teachers in those 2 competencies. And when our professional development is aligned to our instructional focus at the school, you will see marketable improvement in this category. So we're aligning all this language together now, which has been a heavy lift. I mean, it's been 2 years to be able to get to this point, but now we're very crystal clear about what we're going to be developing throughout the system.
Is this the area that catches your eye, Superintendent, when you look at it? When you look at this heat map? Instructional support to me?
I think anybody that walks classrooms would be able to know that. I mean, we chose cognitive demanding tasks as like the center of our district's instructional work from year 1, because that's the issue not only in BPS but just nationally. Young people are not engaged cognitively in class. It's just the rigor of instruction, the rigor of learning just needs to be elevated, especially as we're in Common Core world, as we're in the next generation science standards world. That's the heavy lift.
Excellent. Thank you.
And can I just echo, I want to say thank you for acknowledging that, because no matter the advantages and disadvantages we see in our students, they are capable of engaging in cognitively demanding tasks. And so I thank you for just continue to set that bar high and that expectation among our teachers that our students can do this. And you're exemplifying that with your leadership. So thank you for emphasizing that, because we need to remember that our students are capable of it.
So thank you for your work on this, and Superintendent for highlighting this. Boston Public Schools don't succeed until these schools are succeeding and the students in these schools are succeeding. And this is so critical to the overall effort for the district. And thank you, Superintendent, for your closing comments on this topic as well. I think we're all aligned with you on this issue. So thank you for your work. We'll move on now to our next presentation, our annual update from the Office of Equity. This time I'd like to invite Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Equity, Becky Schuster, to please step forward. Ms. Schuster, we're going to take a couple of minutes break because we do not have a quorum up here. So a couple of minutes, we're going to take a break. And so we'll take a 4-minute break and then we'll start with the presentation.
Hey, how are you? Good, how are you doing? Good.
So, Ms. Schuster, welcome.
Thank you.
Superintendent, do you have some opening remarks to make about the presentation for the Office of Equity?
Yes. Assistant Superintendent Becky Schuster will provide the school committee its annual presentation of the work of the Office of Equity. Becky is going to highlight how she and her team have done, what they have done in the areas of expanding language capacity, streamlining reporting systems, which includes better tracking of trends, how they've improved protocols to both investigate claims of bias-based incidents, but also conduct proactive work in training our staff, students, and families on cultural proficiency. Very proud of the work that they have done. I think she'll hopefully introduce her team before she gets started. I look forward to the presentation.
Thank you very much, Superintendent, and thank you, Chairman O'Neill, and the rest of the school committee. I'm very pleased to be here tonight to report out on the previous school year, which was the first full school year that I have been with the district, and that this team that I will proudly introduce you to has been with the district. So I am here tonight. On my right behind me is Senior Equity Manager Stephen Chen. Next, our Director of Compliance, Gina Pierre. Our Staff Assistant, Grace Jones. Our former co-op student and current part-time employee, Abby Plummer. And lastly, our current co-op student, Paulina Ruiz. So these are the folks that are working hard every day in the Office of Equity to do everything we can to address bias-based incidents that are brought to our attention and to do everything we can to prevent those incidents from happening, and by addressing program issues, policy issues, providing training, everything that we can figure out to hurl ourselves at creating a district that provides equity for every student, every employee, every family. I'd like to tell you that I'm proud that this team has language capacity in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Korean, and Chinese. So we are able to meet the needs of the overwhelming majority of the families that contact us, as well as employees. Some of our employees also need translation assistance when they contact us, so we have that ability within our staff. I am excited to update you on the work that we've done in the past year. The last time I was in front of you, I emphasized that we had done a lot of work to update our equity circulars, the internal policies regarding equity. We made a lot of changes last year. We made changes last year in terms of how we approach our work around investigating bias-based incidents. And I think in particular, we made strides in ensuring that every student and family member and employee knows that we exist and knows to come to us when something concerns them, that school leaders know to come to us when they become aware of an incident that may benefit from our attention. And we've seen a big growth in terms of awareness that we are here and folks taking full advantage of what we have to offer. So this year I'll be highlighting the next stage in our development as an office. I'll be talking about what we've done to ensure that people are aware of our availability, how we've created written protocols this year, and I'll tell you more about how important that has been, and how we've built what I would call our internal consultancy, that the Office of Equity is available to be at the table, to bring a lens of equity to decision making, and to help build capacity in the district so that others become more able to bring that lens to work. And when I talk about a lens of equity, I would say our top emphasis is on racial equity, but we also are frequently raising issues around our students with disabilities, as well as English language learners. I'd say those are the top 3 issues of equity that we address on a daily basis. And the other change you'll see in our report this year that the superintendent referenced is that for the first time, this is the first full year where we've been using a data tracking system called LaborSoft to track all of the formal responses that we provide to concerns that are brought to us. So for the first time, we're going to be able to provide you very concrete data
on the calls and emails and faxes and walk-ins that we have received this year. And going forward, this means we'll be able to tell you about trends. So we're excited about that. And before I just jump in, I also just want to acknowledge we work every day with people and all different roles in this district, with the instructional superintendents, with the operational superintendents and leaders, with the leads of the various departments in the central office, and the Opportunity Achievement Act, Human Capital, Data and Accountability, Engagement, Succeed Boston, Safe and Welcoming Schools, our excellent legal team, our labor relations team. We are on a regular basis working in close cooperation, and we greatly appreciate the teamwork that we benefit from. And I also would like to acknowledge the support of the superintendent, who is just unwavering in his commitment to equity and puts equity first on a daily basis. Donna Muncie, who works very closely with us day to day. And I'd also like to thank the school committee, because I have been watching you raise issues of equity on a repeated basis over and over again with great thoughtfulness and depth, and I appreciate your role in bringing these issues to the fore as well. All right, so let me tell you about some of the exciting work that we've been doing. So first, in terms of equity policies and protocols, as I mentioned earlier, we this year for the first time have written protocols for how the district approaches conducting investigations of bias-related concerns. And we have these protocols in three areas. First, how we have written protocols for how the Office of Equity approaches our investigations, and that's to help us with consistency and also just to make it accessible so that people can read and understand how our procedures work. Second, we have written protocols when we designate a school leader or a department leader in central office to conduct an investigation, what procedures they should follow is now in writing. And I think this is particularly important because we are setting people up to be effective when they are designated by us to conduct an investigation. And third, the biggest change in the equity circulars this year was that we moved responsibility for sexual misconduct investigations to the Office of Equity. We are partnering with operational superintendents and operational leaders as appropriate to conduct those investigations, but we now have overall responsibility in the Office of Equity for sexual misconduct investigations in the district. And so our third written protocol is around how to address sexual misconduct investigations. Previously, often these investigations were left in the hands of school leaders, and we felt that that really wasn't fair to them, that many of these investigations are quite complex, sometimes involve interaction with police and Boston Police Department, school police. We wanted to make sure that we had a smaller core team of people who are taking on those investigations for the district. And lastly, we developed, along with the Opportunity Achievement Gap Office, a set of guidelines around how teachers in the classroom can approach conversations that may include offensive language. Sometimes when we're teaching about complex concepts about history, about discrimination, about civil rights, we need to talk about very difficult words, difficult terms, difficult times in history, and we wanted to give teachers as many tools as we could to approach those conversations in a way that's going to work well for every single person in the classroom. In terms of our investigations, I'm very pleased to say, thanks to this excellent team behind me, that we began this school year with no backlog. And that's after responding to a total of 368 formal requests for assistance around possible bias-based incidents. Those requests come from employees, from students, from family members, and we respond in a variety of ways, including investigations, including providing coaching, sometimes referrals. We have 2 certified mediators among our staff. We provided climate audits where it seemed that issues were broader than a single incident. We also have one member of our team who is certified in restorative justice practices, and we've applied that approach as well. So those are only, that 368 is only the formal incidents that we've responded to. There are hundreds more of informal conversations that we have every day, helping, in particular, our school leaders navigate difficult moments in their classrooms and hallways. We responded to 144 accommodation requests. This is primarily employees requesting disability accommodations in the workplace. We have partnered with Boston Latin School to ensure that we implement the new resolution agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we're proud that in partnership with the leadership of Boston Latin, we've gone beyond what was required by that agreement and seen good progress at Boston Latin this year. And lastly, we helped to establish a over $6 million capital budget allocation for to achieve gender equity in the locker rooms at the Mandela Complex, which is the shared campus of Madison Park and the O'Brien School, where there was a discrepancy in terms of the quality of the locker rooms for male and female students, and that will be corrected soon. Now I'm going to dive into the data that I mentioned is now available. First, in terms of those concerns where we conducted investigations, you can see on this chart that about a third of the concerns brought to us have been employee to employee. So an employee saying that another employee has engaged in bias-based conduct. And just over a quarter, 27% of the incidents brought to us were students reporting being mistreated or some kind of bias by another student. And you can see a number of other categories where that we have received, whether it's employee to student or a student to a parent, et cetera, all these other combinations of reporters and subjects, but those are our largest two, employee to employee and students. In terms of protected category, you can see that by far the most frequent form of bias that is reported to us is racial bias. The second largest category is national origin, which comes in at 17%. I want to note that this chart does not include our sexual misconduct cases. Also that we did count twice and sometimes even more than 2 times any case where someone was alleging multiple forms of bias. So if someone came to our office and said, I'm being discriminated against based on my race, my age, and my disability, we counted that case 3 times so that we could reflect an overall view of the protected categories of the cases that we've received. In terms of what happened, once we received these calls and emails and other forms of communication, also sometimes reports through the Student Rights app. Generally, the largest, the most frequent thing that happened next was that we designated someone to investigate that incident, and that was 30% of our cases. And just behind that, at 29% of our cases, are investigations that were formally conducted by the Office of Equity. And you can see there's a number of other next steps that we take in a smaller number of cases. In terms of our findings, when the Office of Equity led an investigation, 62% of our cases resulted in some kind of finding of a violation of an equity circular, whereas 38% of the cases we did not find sufficient evidence to show that a circular was violated. We always try, when an incident comes to our attention or an allegation comes to our attention, to leave things better than we find them. Sometimes that means providing training to individuals, to groups, to entire teams. Sometimes that means providing coaching to a manager who, while he or she may not have been engaged in something that appears to be bias-based, they're struggling as a manager, as a supervisor, and need some more support to be effective in their roles. So regardless of whether there's a finding or not, we try to do everything we can to support the individuals who are reporting or subject to an investigation. In terms of training in our prevention work, the Office of Equity conducted a total of 98 training sessions during this past school year. 37 of those were equity protocol sessions, so we've now trained every principal
and at least one other designee in every building. So there's at least 2 people in every Boston Public School who've been through equity protocols training and know how to respond when an incident occurs. We've also trained all central office, facilities, food service, transportation supervisors. We are lucky that Stephen Chen, our senior equity manager, was among the first cohort of a group of folks who nationally were trained in a curriculum called Welcoming Schools. This is sponsored by the Human Rights Campaign, and Stephen has been delivering these sessions for the last few years in the district. This year, 37 of those sessions for 10 schools, and also for all of the folks who were trained as bullying intervention specialists this year. And lastly, we've been conducting gender identity training sessions. This is most often for schools where there's one or more students who identifies transgender or gender nonconforming, and the teachers and administrators would like to make sure that they know how to effectively support those students. We also added this year a web-based training that's now available on our website that's particularly aimed at parents who want to understand more about equity protocols. In addition, around training, I think we talked about this a little when I was here last year. This was the first full school year where every employee who was found to violate an equity circular and every student who was found to violate an equity circular was provided with training. So we are now making sure that we don't just discipline employees or students, but that we, again, leave things better than we found them, provide educational programming. And I'm especially pleased that the student training is now being held on Saturdays at Succeed Boston, so that we are not removing students from classrooms in order to receive this training, but we are providing it on Saturdays. And depending on the nature of the incident, the students will always get an overview of their rights and responsibilities in terms of civil rights at school, but they also get specific information. So if we have a student who, for example, made a comment that was derogatory towards Muslims, they are going to be educated about the Muslim religion, about Islamophobia, etc. So depending on the nature of the incident, the training is tailored to them. We have a poster campaign so that you can now go into any Boston Public School and see posters that are educating our students and employees and families about the availability of the Office of Equity, and our website is much more comprehensive than it was a year ago. I'm proud that on May 10th, the Boston Public Schools Office of Equity, in partnership with the Boston Educational Development Foundation, hosted a statewide conference on emerging best practices for preventing and addressing bias-based incidents in schools. So we had we had nearly 200 superintendents, assistant superintendents, student support services directors, principals come together to learn about the work that the Office of Equity is doing as a model for what districts can be doing around responding to bias-based incidents. And we brought a number of partners such as the Anti-Defamation League, the Kingian Nonviolence Practices folks, restorative justice experts, YWCA Boston, which provides dialogues on race for schools. A number of partners came to share what programs they have available as well. Stephen this year delivered some of the second cohort of maybe the third cohort of Welcoming Schools trainers. He was, Human Rights Campaign flew him to Washington, D.C. to help prepare the next group of trainers. Gina Pierre went to Amherst Pelham to train their internal investigators. We're more and more being called upon to share our work beyond just Boston. In terms of our proactive work to bring an equity lens to everything that happens in the district, we are partnering on a daily basis with the Office of Human Capital to improve our hiring and retaining of teachers of color, particularly Black and Latino teachers. And I know you're going to hear a lot more about that project from Emily Kwazabash at your next meeting, and I look forward to supporting that presentation. You will find Office of Equity staff in a wide variety of department and task force meetings playing the role of bringing the lens of equity to everything that we do in the district. And this year, I couldn't possibly list all the times that we were fortunate to have the opportunity to consult internally, 2 folks, but a few examples would be, we added some questions about equity to the student, teacher, and parent climate surveys for all schools. We helped the enrollment folks around how to apply equity to waitlist policies. We supported the expansion of restorative justice practices in our schools. We are always looking for ways, small and large, that cumulatively will shift the district in the direction of equity. And I think perhaps the most important part of that is building capacity. So we've been working closely with the Office of the Opportunity and Achievement Gap to provide training to the district leadership team, to school leaders, to folks who are in decision-making roles in the central office, to train them how to apply an equity lens to their decisions, because obviously Colin and I can't be at every table. And so the more that we have people raising these questions, keeping that lens, keeping that perspective as they approach decisions, the better things will go. And I've also been partnering with folks in other parts of the city to continue to move the needle on equity more broadly than the Boston Public Schools through my work with the Boston Alliance for Racial Equity, the City's Resilience Collaborative Design Team, and the city's internal racial equity framework folks. So continue to cooperate with folks at City Hall who are doing similar work to what we're doing here at Boston Public Schools. In terms of our goals for the coming year, we look forward to continuing to bring efficiencies to our responsive work, because we want to spend as much time as we can doing the proactive work, the coaching work, the training work, the policy work. We will continue to provide equity protocols training, and this year our goal is to every school administrator. I mentioned earlier we've already trained every principal and headmaster and 1 additional designee per building, but some of our buildings have larger administrative teams, and we want to make sure all of them have this skill set. And we will continue to roll out the use of a racial equity tool that Colin and I have worked on developing in partnership with some folks from the Center for Social Innovation, to make sure that as many people as possible understand how to use that tool, how to apply it, and become increasingly able to do so without someone sitting with them from the Office of Equity or from Colin's team. And I want to mention that the 21st Century Building Fund that is providing some very exciting new furniture and technology to our schools. In partnership with Tommy Welch and others, we've made sure that every school leader is required to use a streamlined form of the racial equity tool to consider how those expenditures will particularly close achievement gaps in their school, including looking at Black and Latino students, students with disabilities, special education students, and also English language learners. So this is one of our first broad ways that we're applying the racial equity tool and ensuring that our school leaders understand how to use that tool when they're making decisions that impact our students. So that concludes my presentation, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Schuster, and I'll open up now to community members for questions. Is all that I've done?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I wonder when you guys all sleep, but I'll leave that on this time. I'm just really in awe. I'm trying to understand how you get all that work done. So thank you, everybody, for all your work. And I wonder, it's a comment more than a question. I really like how you presented, that this is a district-wide, that you're seeping into everything and really trying to get everybody to really look at this, that it's everybody's responsibility. And I just want to really point that out. That's just so wonderful to hear. And I wonder how we do similarly around the parent and family engagement that we're talking about, that it's not just the Office of Equity, it's every single person's responsibility to make sure that we have a district that's equitable and fair for everyone. Similarly, using family and parent engagement, that all families should be engaged and feel part of it. So it's just a comment. So thank you for really communicating that and carrying that. Thank you, everybody, for all the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Team Robinson.
I want to also thank you, but specifically because we had some negative experiences that took place in the district, and the response to those experiences was the work that you just presented tonight. I'm thinking of specific negative experiences that have now created a comprehensive structure for the district. So for that, I want to say thank you. And that is work that is worth not sleeping over. You know, that keeps you up at night because it kept us up when we were faced with some of those real challenges that, you know, put Boston on the map nationally once again, and not in a great way. So I want to say thank you specifically for your leadership in addressing key issues that were negative, and you created not only a positive structure, but a successful structure that is really benefiting everyone. So thank you for that. One question, update on BLS student parent feedback on some of the systems that you've implemented. What are the walls saying?
Yeah, great. So I'm going to ask Stephen Chen to come up and join me. He's been our key liaison to Boston Latin School, and he can actually share with you. We do have some data on some positive shifts in terms of student perception.
I love it when you anticipate a question. That's just amazing. He has a report.
He has a report.
He has a report.
What a shock that topic came up.
Good evening, everyone. I just had a couple of things to share about Boston Latin in particular with the DOJ compliance report, as well as what we're hearing feedback-wise from students and from the broader BLS community. And so just with regards to our DOJ compliance, we just finished the first year of the compliance agreement that we made with DOJ. And among the things that we are required to do is we do an annual school climate audit at the school. And so we initially did a school climate audit as a response to looking at, 2 years ago, to look at the school climate as part of our broader efforts to look at during the investigatory phase 2 years ago. And then this past year, just about a month ago, we finished our first climate audit, which we hired Sangati Law Office, which is, there are a number of attorneys there with extensive civil rights experience. And what we found was that they made a couple of key recommendations out of that report. So what they had found was that in those recommendations, they found that we should continue to provide a high level of engagement to continue to expand our efforts for effective outreach, to expand student participation in the exams, annual trainings, and continued programming for staff and students on bias and racism. The other key piece that I wanted to share was something that Becky mentioned was we did get to put some questions into our annual school climate surveys. And amongst those, we still are collecting a lot of this data, but there are two kind of key data points that are showing some trends. And so I did bring two of them today. So in the 2015-2016 school year, on the question of whether or not their teachers explored and discussed issues of race, 60% of students responded to that question with agree or strongly agree. This past year, when we looked at that same data, and the question's a little bit different, but it states, my teacher supports me in my cultural identity. It went from 60% to 86% this year who agree or strongly agree. Another measure that we looked at was on the question of whether or not staff reduce and prevent racial discrimination in the school. For the 2015-2016 school year, only 45% of the students there reported that they agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. This past year, when we got the same question, or it wasn't exact, but it was my teachers actively addressed bias-based behavior. The answer to that was 85% of students agreed or strongly agreed. And I think that's a reflection of the efforts that we made at Boston Latin School, very specifically to have all of the staff, from the teachers to the floor masters to the administrators, to all learn how to, number one, identify bias-based incidents, but then also to develop a protocol and procedure so when that occurs, that we're handling them fairly. But with that said, I do want to really note that we're pleased with kind of these numbers that are coming up, but we also know that there's more work to do. So during the Sangati climate audit, which to be clear, they're focus groups, so we're getting student feedback, we're getting parent feedback. We're getting a lot of different comments. The students who participated in the focus groups overall expressed a positive sense of their belonging at BLS across race. However, we did note that there were a number of Black students who were interviewed who spoke about their experiences of experiencing racial isolation and the need to increase numbers of Black and Latino students at the school.
Just want to add that comprehensive training has happened this year for every student at Boston Latin School, open trainings for parents and anyone who chose to attend, and mandatory participation in training for all faculty. And the faculty had options. They could choose between participating in the YW Boston Dialogues on Race, or in Courageous Conversations, or in applying the 7 forms of bias to the Boston Latin School curriculum and being part of a team to make changes in the curriculum so that it's more culturally responsive. So every member of the Boston Latin School faculty participated in one of those 3 options. Again, not only meeting the requirements of the Department of Justice agreement, but going beyond what was required.
And then the last piece of the DOJ compliance was one thing that we agreed to was that there wasn't really a comprehensive tracking system. And so very similar to how we can now track all of our cases of equity and identify trends, BLS now has a very comprehensive discipline tracking system, and we track both bias-based incidents as well as all student incidents from tardies to, and all of that is actually tracked in a way that's done in real time. So when it occurs, they get sent through a process to Beth DiVerano, the assistant headmaster. And with that, we can get a real good sense of what is happening across the school. We can cut it across race, we can cut it across a number of different demographics, just so we can identify trends, not only through the course of the school year, but also across time.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's a great update, and great to hear that improvement. I also just wanted to highlight the fact that you all responded to these investigations. We all know that doesn't mean that they just sent a general email that said, we're in receipt of your email. We know that, right? Mr. LaConta, that's his work every day. So I want to just, I just want to say that this is huge to highlight that you all responded. You began the school year with no backlog and you responded. Responses mean there's a conversation, there's a follow-up, there's more conversations, there's possibly an investigation, there's questions to ask, and in-person meetings. So that means you have to travel to schools. And so I just wanted to highlight this piece here, because this is the work I do in higher ed, and this is no small feat at all. So I wanted to highlight that. Another question I had, slide number 4, the reports that are not clearly defined, is there any explanation? Where's the lack of clarity? Is it from the reporters, from the subjects, from the incidents?
This is Gina Pierre, the Director of Compliance, who oversees all of our investigations. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. That could be from folks who may send an anonymous letter not making clear who they are, who they're concerned about. It could be someone walking in saying, I'm upset, but I don't want to give you more details. This is when we don't have enough data, despite our efforts to find out who are you, what are your concerns, and how can we further support you.
Okay. And then the 14 to 1, that's 16, 17% that involves parents. What's your protocol, process, connection with training or educating and engaging parents when there's an incident?
So parents are similarly supported by the policy. So if a parent brings forward an allegation, we will review a parent's concern similar to a student or a employee. I think the difference with parents is, though, if there is misconduct alleged towards a parent, meaning the parent is the one being accused, typically we take an approach of a conversation between us, the parents, and the school leader to share our expectations of the school community, but different from a student or employee, we are not able to take any disciplinary action if the parent is engaged in misconduct.
The only exception to that is if a parent has behaved in a way that is so egregiously biased or may involve violence or threats,
Obviously, at that point, becomes a safety issue, and we will, very rarely, very, very rarely, but on occasion, we will need to ban a parent from a building. But that's extremely rare. Most Boston Public School parents are eager to engage in very positive ways, and if they say something perhaps that was not entirely appropriate, they usually welcome the coaching and do not repeat that.
That's good to know. And then lastly, the upcoming dates for a training session. Superintendent, would it be possible if we're able to attend a training session just to learn and be educated ourselves on their process?
Absolutely. We would love to have all the members of the school committee are warmly welcome to an equity protocols training session. We'll make sure you have our ongoing schedule available to you.
And if any members have not done a YW Race Dialogue, I'd encourage it. It's pretty life-changing.
I asked the school committee to actually contact me.
Okay, yes.
We'll facilitate that.
Thank you.
So, as well, Mr. Lecanto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dean Robinson, I just want to let you know that I'm in receipt of your comments. Just two quick questions. I don't want to belabor all the good, great line of questioning from my colleagues. Just want to get a little bit more data from you. So you mentioned earlier that some of your complaints come in through that Student Rights Act. And if I recall, we get data on a yearly basis from BSAC. They're up to something like 5,000 downloads. So I wonder, do you have data on, what's precisely how many reports are coming in through the app?
Yeah, so the app can be used not just to report bias-based incidents, but also concerns related to, for example, disciplinary practices that students may find unfair, or other incidents in schools that have nothing to do with bias but concern those students. So I'm not familiar with the overall statistics, but what I can say about in terms of bias-based incidents, that we receive very few through the app.
The other question I had was about the welcoming schools, and it's great to hear that we're going through the training and taking that back to our individual school communities. The question I had was around the certification that HRC does around the Welcoming Schools program. If I recall, a few years ago, JFK and Jamaica Plain was our first. Have we extended certification, or have other schools sought certification from HRC?
Yes, that's a great question. So right now, the JFK is still the only school in Massachusetts that is fully certified by HRC as a safe and welcoming school. However, with that said, right now I'm currently working with 12 of our K-5 or K-8 schools to work towards certification. And I believe that if we are on track, there will be another 4 schools by the end of this school year that have gone through 2 years worth of PD and implementation of the Welcoming Schools approach in their schools. And those schools are the Roosevelt, the Gardner Pilot School, the Haley School, and the Guile Elementary School.
And without having to go into all the work that those schools have to do to achieve the certification, can you maybe just give for the other members and the public a 30-second synopsis of what that certification means and what it is meant to certify?
Yeah, so certification is not a simple process of just getting through PDs or just doing like lessons or anything like that. We're really talking about a process where we're going from the ground up to really affect school culture, from the level of policy to relationship building with students, to visual indicators of your school being a welcoming school, to a curriculum piece, to the PD piece. And so ultimately there's a series of 9 different categories that schools are working towards to develop their proficiency in a number of different domains to become a welcoming school. And by the time they're done, the goal is for someone from the Human Rights Campaign to come out to the school and basically do a day-long audit where they will spend time in classrooms, they'll talk with students, and they will kind of get to see what the practice of the schools are. And if all goes well, then they will certify the school as a welcoming school. And so it's an exciting process, but it's also a process that before I go into any school, I will meet with the school parent council, I will meet with the school site committee, I will meet with the school administrators, with the teachers, because I do require a significant amount of buy-in because it is a lot of PD time for our schools. But once we get that buy-in, like I'm all in, and the school and the community are all in as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. Dr. Uriarte.
I'm gonna be very brief, but first of all, thanks a lot. It's really
Dr. Uriarte.
helpful to understand your work and the situation that exists in the school. The only question that I have, I mean, you've given us a lot of very good data, but I wanted to know, in this, yours are numbers, is reported bias-based incidents, investigative findings. Of those that you found that there was a reason, what is the breakout by category?
I don't have that data with me. I would imagine that it would approximately mirror how the protected categories broke out in that chart. I can't say that
Becky, let's just get that data to that.
Oh, of course, I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Just to see whether it, also, just from your own experience, what tends to be over-reported, and then you find there's not a finding, or, how does that behave?
Yeah, what I would say is, I guess I hesitate to use the word over-reported because I think that's okay. And the reason is because I think when people come to the Office of Equity, there is always some source of upset. It may not either be, they may not fully understand the role of the Office of Equity, and they bring their upsets that have nothing to do with bias. They may bring upsets that they're attributing to bias, but we don't see evidence that that's the case, and sometimes they're bringing incidents that are related to bias. So if I was going to look in that second category of when they are having a challenge and they're attributing it to bias, but we don't find sufficient evidence to show that, I think that usually is a result of communication breakdowns. Breakdowns in terms, the classic one is it's evaluation season, and a teacher or other employee of paraprofessionals, why does it say this on my evaluation? Nobody told me before. This is the first I'm hearing that they're not happy with this area of my performance. It must be because I'm a member of this particular protected category, right? So that's an incident where we want to do our best to provide coaching to the person who's in the evaluator role about how to make sure that that communication is constant. It doesn't just happen once a year. How to make sure that examples are provided and explanations given so that a person isn't left wondering, why did this happen to me? And when human beings are left to wonder why something happened to them, often we conclude it must be because I'm, right, a member of whatever group, and that's just human. So in those instances, we, again, try to provide coaching and sometimes mediation or restorative justice, trying to improve that relationship, even though the evidence is that bias may not have been the key factor.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Ms. Schuster and the entire team. I just have 3 quick questions for you. Ms. Schuster, with all of this that you've done and the team has done, and this is astonishing, what are you proudest of in the past year with regards to equity in Boston Public Schools?
That's a really wonderful and difficult question. I guess I have to pick 2. One is I'm just deeply proud of the human beings that I work with every day. This is just an extraordinary team of people that I would want beside me for any challenge, no matter what it was. But in particular, this challenge where the quantity of work that comes in our door is extreme, the meaningful nature of the work is significant. And I know that every single person sitting behind me will do everything they can to truly assist the people who come to us seeking help. And in a way that's fair, in a way that has depth, in a way that has profound human caring behind it. So I think that's one. And then the other I'd say is the expansion in the work around bringing the lens of equity to everything we do in the district. And I see that growing geometrically, wherever I am. I hear people raising questions. Gee, why is it that this group of people is at the table? Aren't we missing some of the people most impacted by this decision? Or, gosh, when we look at these numbers in our budget, how can we analyze whether we're impacting the most marginalized students? Whenever I'm hearing those questions asked, I can sense just the deep desire among my colleagues and among people at every level of the district, parents, students, folks who work in every aspect of the Boston Public Schools, who are really eager to do what we can to set things right.
What frustrates you the most?
What was that?
Ignore the superintendent.
I never ignore the superintendent. I guess I would say that.
What are you trying to get at with the Office of Equity that you haven't been able to
Yeah,
get?
if I was going to pick one thing that frustrates me, the greatest issue of equity is not within the Boston Public Schools. The greatest issue of equity is between the Boston Public Schools and the larger picture across the state and the country. We do not have the resources we need for our students. We do incredible work with the resources we have. But ultimately, I would like to see the pie get larger instead of just applying equity to splitting the pie.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that information about Boston Latin, Mr. Chen. Is that public data?
It hasn't been published currently, but certainly.
No, it is.
But yes, we have just given voice to it now, yeah.
Well, I look forward to the press reporting it with the same breathless anticipation that they focused on the issues before. And speaking of which, what was the press coverage of you hosting a statewide conference and having 200 superintendents come to learn from Boston Public Schools on
May 10th.
What was the topic in particular?
Emerging best practices for preventing and addressing bias-based incidents in schools. So we opted very deliberately this year not to invite press or do a press release about the conference because we felt that the important thing was the quality of the conversation that was happening there, and it was our first time out. But we had support from the Nellie Mae Foundation and a few other generous sponsors to make that conference happen. And it looks like Nellie Mae is going to support us to expand that conference this year to Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. So it'll be a larger event. We're going to, our plan is to expand it to 2 days instead of 1. And I would imagine that perhaps this year we'll feel a little more ready to shine the light of the press on the event.
And the last question is, when you come back to us next year to present, what will be the big thing you will have tackled?
I hope that we will have achieved having every administrator in every Boston Public School trained, and that will be able to give you numerous examples of how the racial equity tool has been applied in key decisions in the district.
Do you have the resources you need to make that happen?
We were fortunate to add 1 additional FTE this year with the support of the superintendent, and I will continually assess how we're doing, but at the moment, we're just about getting it done.
Thank you. Well, the work that you and your team are doing is incredibly important, so we want to make sure you have the resources to make that happen. Thank you for all of you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
So we'll move on now to public comments on reports. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. We have no speaker this evening.
Okay, thank you. I would like to report on a new business, a issue that came up earlier this evening. I do want to respect student confidentiality, but I would like to report and...
Excuse me, Mr. O'Neill. I just got the high sign that someone would like to speak.
Oh, I apologize. We did have one speaker for public comment. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was supposed to go up there.
So hold on for a second. Just come up and sit, please, and introduce yourself, and then we can go from there. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Dolores Wood, and as a teacher, an English and ESL teacher at one of the level 3 schools that was in the report today, I just wanted to say a few things about the reporting here. I will speak personally about my experience in reviewing the data for my own students, so that in seeing the microcosm, you might get a better idea of how it fans out across the district. Student growth percentile doesn't count the records I'm attaching here, and there are many, many more at our school. Imagine moving mountains to help an ESL 1 student pass the MCAS at ESL 1. It is shocking that he has to take the test at all, but he does. He passes, no SGP. He gets an advanced in the math MCAS, no SGP. Because he has only been here a year and there's nothing to compare it to. There's a lot of those students, and we work very, very hard to get them to pass, and then it doesn't count in an area that is hurting us. The other thing is that ESL 1 and 2 have to take the test at all. It's an ESL 5 test, so you're asking a student at that level to achieve something that is so far out of reach. We can work with them, and we do get them to pass it, but it's not even optimum for their education. It doesn't really further their capacities. It gets them like they're clinging to the survival rate at that. They're not really benefiting as much as they should. And I also attached the WIDA, the performance levels. A student could be getting an A+ in ESL 1 and 2 and fail miserably on MCAS. So it goes beyond their rubric for performance to take that test. Also, I was very pleased to hear you ask about how the students were assigned, because we do have more ESL 1 and 2 students that have to take that test. And I think that makes a difference in the school for our measurements, that nobody even tries to find out what level the ELL students are and take that into account in whether they become a turnaround school. Anyway, I appreciate it. I know it's been late, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. With regards to new business, I do want to respect client student confidentiality, but I do want to report to members that an issue that was raised earlier today has been solved. The student is enrolled in a school tomorrow. The headmaster is awaiting that student. Ms. Noriega Murphy reviewed his transcript with both the headmaster and the student, and is glad to talk one-on-one with any committee member who would want further details, but the headmaster is waiting for the student tomorrow, as well as additional seats are available for the other students that the student mentioned this evening. So Ms. Noriega, Dr. Noriega Murphy worked on this personally tonight and is available to talk one-on-one with any school committee member who wants additional details. Okay, and I want to be careful with student confidentiality on that.
So will all the students be called that received a letter to make sure that they are enrolled in school? Because
Yes.
the comment was that there were other students that also were in similar
So
situations.
we will go back and see if we missed any single student. We did reach out to every single student on record at the school. There were only 13 students at Dorchester Academy with fewer than 50 absences last year. So there was a lot of outreach that needed to be done to make sure we brought these school students back into BPS. And we will assure you that 100% of those students that were on that roster last year will have an outreach.
We're going to ask the superintendent as well to get us copies of the communications to the students that were referenced and to report to us in more detail at our next meeting. But I want to specifically reference what was brought up to us this evening and the work that had been done. And again, I want to be careful in discussing this too much, but any member is encouraged to see Dr. Noriega Murphy on this directly. Any other new business? That concludes our business for this evening. The next school committee meeting will take place on Wednesday, October 4th at 6 p.m. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is that unanimous consent, Mr. LaFronto? Thank you for joining us this evening, so we're delighted to have you with us. Looks like unanimous consent.